Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in once again to Dynasty Lifestyle Podcast. It is now episode 6. I'm pretty sure it's episode 6 because we've been running so fast, so quickly. Got so many cool people coming on. Sometimes I lose track of what the episode is, but I'm pretty sure it's episode 6. So today we got a very special guest coming all the way from Europe. And we'll let him introduce himself in a moment. And it's very interesting because we're going to touch on a couple topics. And your name is Patrick Chan. We got Patrick Chan here. Sorry, what's your Chinese name again?
My Chinese name is Tak Tsung in Hakka. In Cantonese, it's called Tak Tsung. And in Mandarin is Tak Tsung.
Nice. And is there any special meaning to your name?
Well, my surname is Chan. From the ancient era, it means listening to a kingdom in the east. Actually, it has a lot of flowery stories to it. And my own name. Tsung is actually means benevolence, and I think that has good meaning to it as well. And my middle name, the middle part of my name is actually my brotherly or sisterly ranking order, which you'll find in the family tree, and it's sort of like destined actually that certain generations must have certain names. It's
nice.
It's in the family book, it's
nice.
That's it.
You mentioned benevolence, which is actually I think is really cool because I mean Dynasty, myself, I think we all kind of preach benevolence, and it's definitely something that the world needs a bit more of, and I think martial arts is a big part of that in bringing together people and teaching them respect. But let's start. Well, actually, can you tell us just a quick biography, like who you are, what you do, like just fill us in on a bit of that, and if you could speak up a bit, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Born and raised in the Netherlands. Some people call it Holland, which is not entirely correct. I'm Hakka of origin, but I have a mixed heritage from my mom's side, which is Jamaican American. My American part is mostly non-existent, I would guess. I'm in my plus 30s at the moment. I've studied information management, finished that. Working currently as a consultant, and I'm going forward with a family business, which is real estate.
Nice.
And that's in a nutshell my biography.
Nice. Is Chinese people are Chinese people buying up all the property in the Netherlands as well?
Well, the thing is actually they are quite happy with it because they're really doing a good job. They're not buying up all the property. We have a lot of Russians over here as well.
Right.
And seemingly, the crisis in Greece actually propelled a lot of Greek millionaires to come over to northwestern Europe, actually.
Okay.
And we see a lot of Greek people over here as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting that I have you on here on this show because you're the first European person I'm interviewing or have on this podcast, and you're gonna have a totally different perspective on a lot of the things. Why not kick it off with martial arts, because that's the backbone of Dynasty. That's the backbone of this podcast, and of course, that's how we got in touch, and that's how we came to be related to one another through martial arts. So why don't you tell me about your martial arts background?
Sure. I'll begin with actually blind enthusiasm for combat sports in general and the arts. And basically, I started off very early on just mimicking movements. I think I was 10 or something like 12, and I had clearly some interest in it. I started off with northern style wushu, which was very acrobatic. I liked it for what it was, but for me it missed combat, it means depth, it means real life situations. Along the way, I got introduced via towards a group of Sifus actually, which were from southern China, and
living in the Netherlands.
These were from my part.
Living in the Netherlands,
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, they all lived in the Netherlands. Well, one is quite specific. One used to live in the Netherlands, but at the time when he was my Sifu. He was one of my 4 Sifus actually, which I'm very grateful of. But if you ever go to Germany, Düsseldorf, he actually teaches combat to the German police force actually.
Wow, legit.
And that's that's really something he's rock on, and he's like, he's like the old-fashioned Sifus who gives you mapus, but also like, he gave me really good insights about how and why and how stuff works.
So you started learning
modern martial arts a bit later, but
you started learning like a combat style of kung fu. Is that what you said? From these Sifus?
From one Sifu, yes, indeed, definitely.
So what did he name it? What did he name it? Was it a style? Was it just something he created? What was it?
No. Okay, his main component is Hong Fat, which is Hong Kun, and Fat, which is the Buddha hand. Actually.
Oh.
Yeah, but the thing is, he kept it very grounded. He says, okay, do these parts for the art, enjoy the art, do the art. But these parts is for raw combat. These parts are for raw combat, and it's like really, you go into combat situations, and it's like no holds barred. I guess that's the right English word to address it to.
Right.
Which means basically actually counter joint kicking, kicking in the groin, and just do it for the win.
Yeah. What are some key moves out of this combat system that he created? So groin kicks. What else?
Yeah, groin kicks is one, and basically it's almost like train marching through your opponent. Actually, you go, and the mindset must be you are protecting yourself and your loved ones. You will fight differently if it's for a title, for a tournament, than if you would say if your family is under threat.
Yes.
The combat psyche is different.
Absolutely.
So he also taught me that actually. You must look at the situation. If your family's under threat, you will do anything to really get the opponent down.
Absolutely.
And if you're fighting a tournament, you're sparring, it's a different feeling.
Absolutely. You bring up a great point. I'm about to go into it for a second. A lot of people who train martial arts, they forget that they forget the reality side of it. A lot of people train martial arts, they're not able to bring themselves mentally to a state where they need to use that martial art in real life, in a real life situation, in reality. If somebody is attacking them on the street, or if somebody is harming one of their loved ones or their family members or whatever, or if somebody's breaking into their house, they have to react quickly, and they have to punish that person swiftly, and they have to basically diffuse the situation as quick as possible. So a lot of people without combat training, the people that just do martial arts for the art, just do martial arts for the forms, just do martial art for the sparring, but they don't think of it in terms of, okay, life and death. Like, I really gonna have to do this to you in a real life situation. Like, I have to break your fingers. I have to crush your genitals. I have to take my fingers and basically grab your eye socket and try and pull your eyeballs out just to get you to stop whatever that you're doing. A lot of people are not in touch with the reality side of the martial arts. They just go through the movements. They go through the self-defense kind of movements, and they think that, okay, that's enough. Like I'm a killer. I'm able to beat anybody now. But that's not true, because doing it in a sport environment is completely different than, okay, somebody breaking into your house, and you know, you have to deal with that person, you know, immediately, right then and there at that moment. You have to drop everything and you have to try and kill this person, because if you don't try and kill this person, guess what? This person might kill you or might injure you for life. So definitely anybody listening to this, you definitely should get in touch with the reality side of martial arts. And even to bridge it further, you know, drills are not enough. You know, I find that drilling is simply not enough, because people get into a comfort zone when they drill. They're like drilling with their partner. Oh yeah, I kicked the guy. You know, I trained this move like 1,000 times. I kicked this guy in the groin 1,000 times. Well, guess what? Now do it in a live situation when the guy is moving and the guy is resisting and the guy is fighting back. You know, so the number one thing is you have to do it in a live situation. You have to have live sparring. You know, and like realistic, you know, not like holding back or anything like that, you know, realistic. So that's why it you know, goes into the whole kung fu thing, and I'm going to use jiu-jitsu as an example. The reason why I'm going to use this jiu-jitsu as an example, because jiu-jitsu is one of those martial arts, I would say quite possibly the only martial art, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but quite possibly one of the very few martial arts on planet Earth where you're able to spar with your partner at full, you know, realism, right? 100% speed, 100% strength, and you're able to not hurt each other while you're doing it. So that's actually what makes jiu-jitsu so great, is because it's so close to reality, you know, it's so close to real life fighting, but you won't hurt each other because you top out and that's it. So that's over. That means like you killed me. So that's what makes jiu-jitsu great, is because you can train in reality every single day and you're not going to hurt each other. Whereas if, let's say, you're doing a striking martial art or you're doing some form of kung fu, if you try to do it full contact, you can't do it every day, because you're gonna hurt yourself, right? You're gonna bang your shin on the guy's elbow. You're gonna hit each other in the face. You're gonna bleed. You're gonna scratch yourself. You're gonna get a concussion. That stuff cannot be done at 100% realism, full speed, full power every single day. You can maybe do that like once a week, you know, to keep your body intact, you know, to keep your brain intact. But that's one of the real big advantages that jiu-jitsu has, and that's honestly the reason why a lot of people you know, gravitate towards jiu-jitsu, because it's very realistic and they feel like sort of the old traditional martial arts or the old kind of Chinese martial arts systems are very much out of touch with that. They focus on a lot of forms, they focus on a lot of techniques, they focus on a lot of drills, focus on very, very minimal sparring, I would say, like minimal realistic sparring. You know, so you know, it comes into a point where, okay, a lot of the training that you do becomes out of touch with reality. So you have guys that train 10 years Kung Fu, 20 years Kung Fu, whatever Kung Fu style it is, right? But realistically, have they fought with a resisting opponent 100% go?
Non-compliant opponent.
Yeah, not a compliant opponent. Exactly. No, they've spent very, very little time actually doing that. So, I mean, in comparison with, say, a jiu-jitsu guy, for example, and I'm just using jiu-jitsu as an example, but you can use any other example as well. Wrestlers who train realism, you know, realistic wrestling all the time. You know, Muay Thai fighters who train realistic Muay Thai, Muay Baran, you know. So a lot of people are out of touch with the reality. So, you know, so it's interesting that you said there's some Sifu in the Netherlands who actually are preaching that. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I'll start to you know, one side of the story. If you enjoy the art, please enjoy the art. Please enjoy the performance. Do that. It's culture. It's tradition. Do that for one specific isolated part. That's what my Sifu also says. You know, he says, well, if you don't think that this is highly applicable, see it as a component of. And you know, I usually I make the distinguishments between, for example, I also, besides martial arts, I also do squash. I think some people call it racquetball maybe in the US.
Mm-hmm.
But I do squash. And
Right.
you squash you do with a racket. It's like tennis. And then you also have badminton, and you also have ping pong. You know, and you cannot put a ping pong person against a tennis person.
Right.
Just like you cannot put a Tai Chi person against an MMA person.
Right.
You get the analogy?
Yeah, no,
that's the
absolutely. And no, it's funny that you mentioned Tai Chi and an MMA person. I have not talked about that big incident. So let's talk about it right now. What is your take on that?
Let's do it.
For those who don't know what the incident was, so there's this Chinese MMA person who retired from doing MMA, but he claims that he trains MMA and everything. He was in China. He challenged, you know, some Chinese martial arts masters saying Kung Fu sucks and stuff like that. So this fake Tai Chi master guy got on board and he got knocked out in 10 seconds. And, you know, after you did a little bit of more research on this Tai Chi guy, you realize this Tai Chi guy is not even really a Tai Chi guy. He, like, you know, self-trained himself.
Exactly.
He promoted himself as a Tai Chi master. He went on a Chinese TV show and, like, did a stupid Qigong trick where he taped the bird's feet to his palm.
Oh yeah.
So the bird wouldn't fly away, and demonstrating fucking like fake ass Qigong and shit. So that's the thing that gets me pissed off, right? That's the thing that gets me riled up, is because Chinese people, they do this to themselves. Like they're so in love with the traditional Chinese culture that, like, there's nothing wrong with loving the Chinese traditional culture, but when you love it and then you take something that's not real and you take something that's fake and then you promote it, you know, on national television or whatever that TV show was, you promote it in the Chinese community that, like, hey, this Tai Chi Qigong stuff really is real. And I'm not saying like the internal Qigong martial art, like that's real, like the internal Qigong martial art of hardening your body and taking strikes and stuff like that. That stuff's all real. Like you go on YouTube, search it up on videos, you'll see real stuff, people performing real stuff. Okay, I'm not talking about the real stuff. I'm talking about when people are faking it. They're taking something and they're doing magic tricks with it, and they're tricking people into believing that, hey, with Tai Chi training, you know, you can you know, get this bird to not fly away from your hand. Like that stuff, that bullshit, like is the type of stuff that, you know, makes Chinese people look bad, you know. And it's bad that you know, these fake Tai Chi master guys are promoting this kind of stuff, and people are falling for it. So in a way, when this Chinese MMA guy stepped up and knocked this dude out in 10 seconds, I was happy, because I'm like, yo, this guy's fake anyways. You know what I mean? This guy's fake. Expose him, right? And wake people up. I thought, okay, it's been a long time coming, to be honest. I thought this stuff should have been done 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm like, Chinese people need to wake up that this BS doesn't work. So, you know, for him to come in and knock him out, I feel like that's doing a community a service. So anyway, give me your 2 cents on it.
Well, I think it's indeed doing the community a service, actually, and it should have been done a long time ago. I think we also have a famous worldly known martial artist called Bruce Lee who also did that. But my take on it, actually, really, this Tai Chi guy, if he does Tai Chi, his stance was actually traditional mantis, actually, and that's not Tai Chi. So you're not gonna fool me with that. You know, I see that, and it's also the stepping wise. You know, you're not used to having straight punches coming lunged at you. It's very weird for you know. My martial training also has a few deviations. I did capoeira, did a little bit of aikido. While I was in Hong Kong, I was also doing MMA and also doing Thai boxing. And once you get straight punched, and it's like, okay, you know, you need to use different tactics. And
nice. You visited Hong Kong before.
Back to the Tai Chi. Yeah, frequently. And I'm going back within now in, I think, 2 or 3 months. Maybe.
You have family there?
But the thing is, I have plenty of family in Southeast Asia.
Sweet.
And South China especially.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way.
Yeah. And, sorry, not to deviate from what you're saying, but yeah, go back to the Tai Chi thing.
Yeah. No, the Tai Chi guy, you know, he got what he deserved. Basically, got what he deserved, and he made You know, if you are legit, you know, train as such, you know, and I really how do you say? I like the fact that it was a Chinese MMA guy that was doing this. You know, he showed, you know, besides the fact that he keeps everything in check, to put it this way.
Right.
It's also a wake up call, like, okay, saying, okay, you cannot pull off this shit. You know, cannot tell you that you're invincible, have a force field, and have those fairy tale stories in current day world. You know. Yeah. Martial arts has to evolve. You know, I know. Because at this moment, I am also doing Kung Fu again with my old Sifu. That was one of the 4 Sifus, actually, the one who stayed in the Netherlands. He's quite close to me. Right. And I study a martial art which is called, in Cantonese, Mo Ka Kun. Oh, Mo Ka Kun, okay, yeah. It's one of this, yeah. It's very rare, and I like the kicking techniques because it's only Southern style, which has diverse kicking techniques compared to the Northern styles that has like acrobatics and stuff. I see. These has vicious low kicks and vicious also kicks that crumble the opponent's toes, etc. You know, it's like stomping also. Yeah. And wow, it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting. But in any case, yeah, the Tai Chi guy, you know, he lost, and it's like, you know, you can tell, you know, by the way he stands, you know, and it's like, you know, I already predicted that he was going to lose somehow before I saw the fight, actually. Right, and you know, you know the other interesting thing about this, and you mentioned just now, like, oh, I'm glad it was like a Chinese MMA fighter who did it, and it's interesting because. Here's how people would have viewed it if it wasn't a Chinese MMA fighter who did it. If it was like a foreigner guy, like a foreigner MMA guy who did it, then it would be a completely, like, it would be taken completely differently from the Chinese community. It would be like, oh, you know, foreigner, you know, arrogant foreigner or arrogant American foreigner or whatever, you know, coming into Chinese society and trying to disrespect Chinese martial arts and trying to disrespect Chinese people. Like, we're gonna fight back and we're gonna beat them down. You know what I mean? And I totally get that from a historical standpoint, from a cultural standpoint. I totally understand. Like, if you're like a proud Chinese person in China, if somebody did that to you, like, yeah, it would bring up all the thoughts. You know, in recent history, they'd be like, oh yeah, we have to, you know, show that Chinese martial arts is strong, so we're gonna send our best to like challenge them back, that type of thing. But because a Chinese MMA guy did it, it was almost like, okay, guys, like, this has nothing to do with the foreigner thing. It has nothing to do with, you know, skin color, race, ethnicity, nothing like that. This is literally about martial arts. So if your traditional Chinese martial art doesn't work in a real life combat situation, then you really gotta think about, okay, am I still gonna teach this stuff, or do people still want to learn this stuff? And that's the part that I thought was very positive in this situation. That I felt was very satisfying because it was another Chinese guy that did it. There's none of that like, oh, Japanese karate master came and challenged, you know, Chinese kung fu and stuff like that. You know, all that stuff in the movies and you know, TV shows and stuff like that. There's none of that sort of wartime element going on with that situation. So it was very, very clear to the Chinese community, hopefully, that they're gonna wake up and be like, hey, you know, let's not you know, follow in the footsteps of these frauds. Yeah, you know, the thing is that there have been a lot of masters who were unchecked, and you know, with the kung fu craze of the 70s, you know, lots of people grew in that era while there was nobody actually checking them, like, what are your credentials, under what masters have you studied, you know. I must give credit to the Japanese, you know, they have the belt system for what it is. I know you cannot put too much emphasis on it, but for the belt system, you at least know, okay, you should have ran through a few academic steps to get the belt which he or she earned. Right. Which is legit to that extent. What I really hate, for example, is nowadays, current days, You see 10-year-olds with black belt, which dilutes the value again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. So originally it was a good thing, like belts meant something, and then now belts don't mean anything. But again, it goes back to why jiu-jitsu is good. Like highlighting, other martial arts, again, also highlights what's so good about jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu belt systems right now are kept in check. Within the jiu-jitsu community, it's very much kept in check because of its high what's the word I'm looking for? Because of the number of competitions. Okay? Because there's a very...
You prove yourself to get there.
Yeah, there's a very healthy amount of competition between, jiu-jitsu schools and jiu-jitsu community and stuff like that. So there's a lot of tournaments always happening. So when you go in there and people don't want to lose face. They don't want to lose, they don't want to be embarrassed. So they are going to be extra hard on their students. If you're a blue belt, then I make sure you have at least had 2-3 years of training before I even give you blue belt, right? If you're a purple belt, I make sure you're really, really good before I even consider you purple belt, right? So that's a good thing. So it makes the belts strong and it makes the belts mean something. And, that's a good thing that
Exactly.
jiu-jitsu is holding on to. But of course, with time, I'm sure with time, you're going to get people that are going to water down some of their belts at some point. And, there's always fake people and posers within certain martial arts communities. But that's going to happen. So, yeah. So let's bring it back. You said you train like a bit of wushu. You said you train Mokka-kun.
Yeah.
You said you train... What other style was that again? I forgot.
Hong Fat.
Hong Fat.
Hong Fat is, it's,
like
it's,
Hong
it's
Kun
also
and Fat,
quite
right? Okay.
It's a quite widespread hybrid outside of South China actually, and here in Europe we have quite a few number of schools actually which do this actually. And, again, it is beyond my idea that I should not really cling on to a style, because also Mokka-kun, the way I study it, to give you an insight, it was firstly aimed as a military kind of style actually.
I see.
Mokka-kun. It uses legs and it has also joint break, joint break techniques. The thing is actually what I find weird is you don't hit the head of the opponent.
Right.
And I asked Sifu, why don't you hit the head? Because, like a good punch could knock him out. And he says, well, you should hit the head, but I'm training here is actually the traditional style, which you should, train for this, but also train for the real life situations. And the thing is, he's being very realistic about this.
Yeah.
The reason why you don't hit the head in the old age is because he had a helmet on.
Oh.
He had armor on. And so you train in a very traditional way that you should grab the helmet and just break the neck with the helmet in it because it's fastened. In that way. Yeah. So that's the thing. It looks quite cool once it's executed, but then you start. Again, when I was younger, I started asking questions like, why don't you just hit the guy's face, And then says, well, you should hit the guy's face. We also will train for that. But here you train the part which is traditional, which is like, he has a helmet on. What are you going to do about that?
Exactly.
So that's the thing. And so I really differentiate between the fact that I do the traditionals, and I love the traditionals. It's form, it's aesthetic, it's nice, it's fluid. But and I also do combat, and really we have a Wing Chun guy who's quite rooted in Wing Chun. I do frequent sparring with him, even though he doesn't like me using legs. That's quite a thing. I have a guy in the same kung fu place who does Tang So Do. Tang So Do is like the Korean martial art. It's like, I think they really have a lot of things which they put on that style, which made it like too abundant. They even use nunchucks, and nunchucks, from my perspective, is quite unknown within the Korean style, actually. All the Korean styles. It's more of a southern Okinawa, Filipino, or maybe even in the old ages in the fields in China.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not a northern thing, nunchucks.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's very southern for sure.
Yeah, very southern.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I keep myself rooted within one part. Do the traditions for the sense of art, and do the raw combat for the sense of raw combat. You need to get used to being, getting straight punches and getting hard low kicks. It's like, yeah, this is like me getting getting a really spicy meal. I love it. It's grueling, but I love it.
Yeah, no, it's good that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
I think it's beneficial for people to get a balance sometimes. So I'll just make a point here. A lot of people who train the combat arts, a lot of people who train, jiu-jitsu full-time, that type of thing, actually sometimes may be damaging their body too much. Because they're constantly training the full contact styles, constantly doing the heavy damage to their body, they get injured. So because your body is fragile, it's not going to last forever, your body. So a lot of people, they don't understand that it needs a balance sometimes. So even for myself, I don't necessarily seek out traditional martial arts training and train the traditional martial arts right now. But, I came from a traditional martial arts base, so I totally understand what you're saying. And I also understand, like, the need for a balance. Like, you can't go hard all the time. So, I take it easy sometimes. I take it soft. I play around with the technique sometimes. I play around with possibilities, right? I think about things a little bit, and I try to have fun with it in the training. I try to have fun, and then when I'm having fun in training, that's when I lose myself, and I'm not worrying about anything else. I'm just in that moment, and I'm training for fun, and everything just seems to be fun to me. And sometimes people need to understand that as well. It's not always life and death, inside the gym, on the mats. Some people, they take it too far. Some people, like, they train full time and they're thinking about, okay, I'm gonna be the next UFC champion or something like that, and they go super hard on their training partners, and basically they act like a douchebag because every single time you do the technique with them, or every single time you spar with them, they're just going 200%. They're trying to break your neck. You know what I mean? It's a little bit too much for the rest of us who are not training, full time. For the rest of us who are not trying to become the next UFC champion, we don't need a broken neck the next morning. You know what I mean? We don't need a broken elbow the next morning. We can train 70-80% effort, right? Sometimes 100%. We're okay with that as long as we're getting better and we're practicing our techniques and we're having fun. That's all that matters. So I think a lot of people lose in touch with the fun part. I don't want to say a lot of people, but I would say some people lose in touch with the fun part of martial arts. You're supposed to enjoy it. You're not supposed to do it and then kill yourself doing it. So, balancing the TMA kind of, training it for the art, training it for the forms, and then also the combat sports side, even just taking it a little bit easy on the combat sports side. It makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned actually Hong Kun. For people who don't know, Hong Kun is actually the style made famous. Well, I don't know if I should say made famous, but I will go out on a limb and say it was made famous by Wang Fei Hong.
Well, he was one of the main characters within that lineage.
Yeah, Wang Fei Hong is obviously Chinese folk hero. So, yeah, man, he used the Hong Kun style as well.
Yeah. No, I'll give you a bit of a sidestep, actually. His wife is called Mo Kwai Lan, and she is the main proponent or the main person in the lineage for Mo Ka Kun, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's where it comes from.
Yeah. So it's like, it's interesting because, a lot of people don't realize this, and I probably went into this a little bit before, but it doesn't matter. Within China itself, because China is such a huge place. People don't know this. China is such a huge place with so many different ethnicities, with so many different provinces, with so many different cities, anywhere you go is like a different part of the country, and it feels like it's its own ecosystem in itself. So when people say, oh, you know, MMA, you should train MMA. MMA is a new thing. Not really, because if you go back thousands of years in China, within China itself, that was the world. So you had people doing Southern Chinese Kung Fu styles. You had people doing Hong Kun. You had people doing Mokaku. You had people doing whatever, Ba Gua Chuan and Xing Yi Chuan and this and that and this and that. Back then, that was MMA. Like, if I, travel to the south and I sparred this Kung Fu master and I picked up a technique here or there, you know what I mean? And then I went to the north and then I learned this, technique here and there, and then I mixed it into my own style and to try and beat other people. That was MMA, but within the Chinese ecosystem, you know what I mean? That was MMA. So they were mixing up those styles even way back then. So which
I want to add something extra to it. Just to add something extra to it is because in the old days, before the Eight Nations Alliance and all the colonists came, they actually had a lot of these, or not a lot, but they had tournaments. The thing is actually the basics of Chinese martial arts as a mindset is to protect yourself. But for tournaments, these styles needed to be applicable towards aggressive attack. The thing was actually, if you're participating in a tournament, you basically signed a death warrant. That's what you signed actually. Because the winner of these tournaments usually have lost an eye or lost a limb. The winner usually has lost something, And because these in the old days, because these fights were so brutal, and then the colonists came, that they said, oh yeah, we might want to introduce boxing because we use gloves and it's a bit more civilized, put it this way. But in the end, where the world is moving towards, I think it will be eventually towards the more brutal martial arts, at which there is ripping, there's tearing, there's pulling, there is jamming in. There is, for example, I might want to ask you as a martial arts towards a martial artist. Have you ever tried as a technique, once you encounter somebody, to basically spit into somebody's face?
Have I ever spat in anybody's face? I don't think so. I can't recall it being. I can't recall ever doing that. But
I just put it this way. The thing is, in the end, it's about winning the match and really go into combat with whatever means to win. Actually, and
no, I agree with that. I agree with that. If there was ever a situation, where somebody attacked me or whatever. It's anything goes. I would spit in his face to get him, distracted in some way, and then punch him right in the throat. I mean, I would spit in his face, and then put my left hand out to gauge the distance, and then throw a right cross right into his jaw or right into his throat. I'll try and aim for the throat, basically. But anything goes. Once the trigger goes, it's on, and then
exactly. This is beyond the art part, but it's raw combat. It looks ugly. It looks not artsy. There's no fluent movement. It's basically beating the person down and winning the game. That's it.
Exactly. And interesting, you brought some of that history up. Let's get into that a bit, because you struck me as a very knowledgeable guy about Chinese history and world history and stuff like that, which is why I wanted to bring you on to this podcast. So let's get into that. So, being Chinese and living in Europe, how is it like? And let me know, how come there's a Southern Chinese a community in the Netherlands? Can you touch on that?
Well, to start with, the thing is, my heritage is Hakka Chinese. In the old days, we used to be, nobility of the Tang Dynasty. We went southwards and further southwards. And we waged some wars against the corrupt governments at that time. We lost, and we need to scatter all the way around. That's why my heritage is a bit mixed. But in the end, I still look very Chinese, I guess. But the thing is, how it became, how we got over here to the Netherlands is because a lot of the Chinese, because of the 200 years basically of poverty of China, that they were scattering all over Asia and further on beyond that even. The thing was, for example, just plainly put, generalizing, Cantonese were already in Hong Kong, mostly in Hong Kong part. And they were already like the fishermen. That they had the fertile grounds, they had the good grounds, and over here they had the fertile grounds in Hong Kong and the areas. So the Hakkas have to move on, or stayed. Some stayed, by the way. That's where part of my family is. In South China. But the thing is, some went as far to Caribbean because they needed workers. They needed, and those were the people who were blacks, that they worked the fields. And the whites were the owners of in the old days, they were the owners of these fields. And they also need people who had technology to grow crops and to administer all these things. And that's where the Chinese were very handy. And sometimes they were also used as hard labor. But yeah, these were the old days, and that's why a lot of Chinese came to the Caribbean.
Around what time?
There are a lot more reasons, but around what time? I think it was during the time when the Opium War was going on, and China was already bleeding empty, bleeding empty of all their money, their possessions, and whatever,
1890, 1900, 1912.
I think 1850 onwards, I guess.
Wow. Okay, I see.
I'm not sure about the date. But there are a lot of Caribbean Chinese actually, and the thing was actually via an uncle. My father landed in Suriname. That's South America. It's on the top ledge of South America. And he started working over there. There were shops, and there was a thriving micro community over there, thriving micro economy. But it was thriving. It was really thriving. And along the way, I think it was the 1970 something. Suriname had their struggle. Now, not a struggle for independence. The thing was, they wanted independence, and they got independence from the Netherlands. So people either had the choice to stay and become a Suriname national, or go to Netherlands and become Dutch.
Oh, so that was a Dutch colony.
National. It was a Dutch colony, yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking perspectives over here.
Right, because I was wondering. Wait a second. Why are you talking about South America? But okay, now I get it.
Yeah, and we need multiple podcasts to really explain this.
Yeah, no worries. We can get off with the basics. Yeah. So how come there's how come there's a Hong Kong community in the Netherlands? Like, the only reason why I know this is because, not that I've been to Netherlands, but the only reason why I know this is, do you know Gua Zai, Young and Dangerous?
Ah, yes, of course.
Yeah, Young and Dangerous 3. Yes, okay, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, Young and Dangerous is a Hong Kong comic book series that's very popular. It talked about, it followed the lives of a group of friends who joined the Chinese triads, and then they make it up to the ranks, and it's very, very heroic and glorifying of like triad, culture and stuff like that. But very popular, and it got turned into a movie series. And I'm talking about Young and Dangerous 3, when guys from Yuen Long, part of the New Territories, part of Hong Kong, they had family in Netherlands, and there's Chinese triads in Netherlands. So I'm wondering, where did that come from?
I'll explain that to you. The thing was actually, the Netherlands has always been very liberal with their drugs, with their prostitution, also with euthanasia, with gays. I'll tell you one shocking part for let's say the black community in the US is, the blacks over here, they had voting right the moment they had acquired a Dutch passport, and they had full rights as a normal Dutch person. That was since 1910, I would say. So the black struggle in the US about the segregation and all the racism was non-existent over here. It was like, the blacks over here, they were like, hey, what's happening in the US? We don't see that happening over here. Even though the blacks over here were considered different, and maybe, because they're quite unknown, and they you don't associate yourself with too much with people who are unknown. But the thing was, the struggle they had in the US about the let's put one specific struggle about sitting in the bus, that was like a non-issue over here, just wherever, So that's the thing. Yeah, it was since 1910 or something. As long as you acquired a Dutch passport, you have full voting rights, you have full rights of appeal, you have full rights of getting a insurance, etc. There was no like blocking. So that's the struggle in the US was quite something like, why?
Right. Well, you still
Getting back to the
didn't.
story.
You still didn't tell me why there was Chinese people in the Netherlands, like Hong Kong people
Yeah,
in
no,
the
I'm
Netherlands.
getting there. I'm getting there. Because of the drug thing, all right. Basically the Dutch were at that time a quite tight-knit community. If you are white, you probably know somebody else is white, and you don't know the boundaries. But Chinese were already quite weaved into society, even though they were accepted, but they were quite considered different. So you, as a well-known Dutch person, you are the gentleman-like, and you wouldn't go to another Dutch person saying, "Hey, you have drugs for me?" That doesn't work. What works is, for example, if you go to a restaurant and ask the other who is in the community who has foreign contacts, ask the other, "Well, can you get me some of that stuff?" And Chinese, being of the old age, you sense a opportunity for business, and that's where it started. The Chinese were considered different, and they were still included into society, weaved everywhere around. So there was actually there in Amsterdam. I don't live in that city, but in Amsterdam there used to be a very thriving, godfather-like figures, multiple of them, who had Chinese. Those were Chinese, and they had contacts in South America, etc. Suriname and Brazil were amongst these places, and also in Asia. And they set up businesses with salaries, with orders, and they really kept a tight check of their business. And in the Netherlands, because we have a liberal drug policy, it's unimaginable in the US, really. If I want to buy hash or anything, it's just 5-minute walk from here near a store, and I can get it. It's really that simple.
And where did the drugs come from? So early Chinese immigrants, they went there, they opened up their Chinatowns, restaurants. I'm assuming that's what we always do. We go and open the restaurant, because we have to make money. And then, so where did the drugs come from? Does it get imported in from China or where?
No. South America, and what I also know is the Golden Triangle. That's in Thailand, Cambodia, and another part. And because the Chinese, they had these contacts. They were already living in a very cosmopolitan kind of world, actually, because the Chinese had contacts, because they have been there. They were quite savvy on world trade anyway. The Dutch were quite up to themselves, actually, I must say. And they're doing a good job at it, though. But the thing was, the Chinese, they had the contacts. They set up lines from South America to the Netherlands, and they really put effort in it to get it formalized as an organization, And the Dutch climate, the Dutch climate allowed these things to just progress, as long as you don't have like a mass drug epidemic over here. But that didn't really happen.
So it's legal for them to deal drugs over there?
At that time, yes. We distinguish between hard drugs and soft drugs, but at that time there was no such really distinction, and it was also still considered medicinal usage, actually. So yeah, they had free reins, and they really became. Yeah, I recently read a story about this, but they really, the Netherlands, Amsterdam was really like a point at which everybody came, and they could buy, sell drugs, and it was how did
which type of drugs? I'm curious to know which type of drugs. Can you be more specific?
My guess say it would be cocaine.
Okay.
That would be the most direct one. I think the secondary one would be heroin.
Wow.
Although I'm not sure about the second one though. But cocaine is definitely one thing, and the besides being a supplier for the Dutch market, they could easily move on to Germany, could easily move on to France. If I want to go to Germany, it would take me 1.5 hours, 50 minutes basically to get to the border, just by driving, and 40 minutes to Belgium. I take the train for 4 hours. I'll be in Paris. These are the distances you're talking about. So they made lots of money making use of these close distances. With
So
markets.
it was like a gangster's paradise. It was like a triad paradise because they could
Exactly.
do whatever they wanted, and they wouldn't be arrested or anything like that. So it would be like a heaven for them.
Yeah, exactly. It would be a heaven, and it was also a safe haven. Because, for example, I would say, how many Hong Kong gang members can read Dutch? If you want to put your family somewhere in a small town, that's really possible. They will never. A rival gang would never be able to find them. How many people can read Dutch in Hong Kong?
Very, very interesting insight. That's a very nice insight. But
we know, some of the how do you say, the old age Chinese over here, they went really, they were having a lot of riches, and basically they were mingling into high society because they had money to spend. The thing is, they over here they take a plane to go to Italy to get suits done and come back the next day. It's like crazy.
Yeah, man.
That's the short story of the Gangster Paradise over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's funny because this actually reminded me, because in an earlier episode there was a African American guy that was trying to make a joke with me on the street, or I was telling this story where we're trying to make a joke on me. It's like, oh yeah, we know Chinese people deal the most drugs and stuff like that. I guess he's right. We do deal the most drugs, but you know what? You know who deals more drugs than we do? The British Empire dealt more drugs than we do because they were selling opium to everybody on the whole planet. So beat that. But yeah, let's.
The British, the British really had their game going on, and they
Queen Victoria, whoever was the queen at the time, she's the biggest drug dealer.
Biggest in the world, basically the biggest in the world. It was pushed by a nation, and the thing is, all the riches, all the things that you see in Britain, for a big part, even though every now and then you also hear, I found in the attic, I found in an old vase, which is from the Ming Dynasty, for example. Just ask yourself, how did that vase get there?
Yeah.
How did that, what was your great-great-grandfather, what did he steal, for example?
Exactly. I mean, you bring up a good point. You bring up a good point, and I'll go as far to say this now because this is Dynasty Lifestyle Podcast. It goes a little bit about identity. It goes about a little bit about history. It goes about into dissecting what it means, to just our identity. So like when people say like, oh, Chinese people copy so many things, and they're like, they counterfeit this and they counterfeit that, and they're not original. They don't come up with their own things, and they're not creative. Alternatively speaking, look at it from another perspective. It's like, it's survival. It's survival. Like, why do we gotta bootleg so many things? Why do we gotta copy so many things? Because we gotta survive. Because at that time, all these people came into our country, and they stole everything. They stole all the gold.
Yep,
they stole all the artifacts. They stole all the treasures. Right? How the hell are we supposed to survive? So when people bring that up and they talk about, oh, you're stealing, really? Like, we're just taking it back. You know what I mean? We're just taking it back. So, if in that context and in that perspective, we're not doing anything that hasn't been done to us, really.
Yeah, Yeah, that's
So
it's a little bit of a weird way to think about it this way, but it's really it's the truth, you know. And the thing was actually, just think about this. Before in the 1950s till the 1980s, it was always the Japanese cars, cheap products, blah blah blah, you know.
yeah.
From the 1980s till probably the 2000s, it was Korean cars, you know, Korean products, Korean this, you know, and now it's the Chinese, you know, and it's for me, it's like, you know, there's constant these waves in the economy and these waves in how the world goes actually, you know, and I really like to think of it as just a natural flow because, for example, here in the Netherlands, we have a city called Delft, just to be very specific, and because the Chinese market in the old days, they were creating very good porcelain, very high quality, very well technologically wise, they were on the top. And the Dutch people, they don't like to talk about this, but they copied the Delft's blue pottery, and they created a copy of the Chinese. They knew it was a copy, but they created it just to be able to meet the market demands. And this is very interesting because once they say, oh, the Chinese copy, the blah blah blah, yeah, you know, it's copying everywhere. You know, it's just meeting market demands. And in the old age, when you mentioned, for example, that China was basically robbed blank of everything because of the Opium War and because of all the debt that they put onto China, because China didn't understand the concept of Western warfare. Thus meaning they invade China. They want to take over the governments, and the Chinese resisted, and the Chinese didn't have a capable army or a really how do you say, a modern capable army.
Yeah.
And they lost. So they said, okay, well, we lost, but we still have to pay the foreigners who aggressively invaded our country. That was like, how does that make sense? You know?
Very embarrassing.
So along the way, you know, it's very embarrassing because you're the losing party and you're gonna have to pay, you know. And besides that, we're gonna also put interest on it. So if you delay your pay, you know, the interest will just go up. And it came to a point where just China was bleeding empty by the day. Actually, that's also when a lot of people actually left towards Southeast Asia or left towards the other parts of the world actually. And and the thing is, just think about how every besides every Chinese person, every Asian person, why did they have to leave Asia? Why did Filipino people have to leave Asia to work elsewhere? Well, why did a lot of in the Netherlands? Why do we have so many South Korean and also some North Korean, but adoptees before? You know, the thing is,
well, in America too,
of poverty. Because
lots of Korean adoptees in America.
And it's because of poverty. And how is this poverty? Why did this poverty exist? Actually, it's because of warfare, because of strife, because of struggle. And the thing is, getting back to a very old story, which we both were playing with, is actually in the old days, China was like the big ancient UN. It was also the thing is, if there was any neighbor that needed assistance with rebellions, with flooding, with piracy or whatever, the Chinese government, the Chinese dynasty at the time, would send armies to help, etc. You know, if they're. But the thing was actually, the foreigners, this means the West conquering the warfaring Western Europeans who set their mind on Asia to divide it. They already saw, oh my God, everything is actually being protected by China actually. So what must we do? We must take down China. We must take down China really hard, so it isn't able to protect its friends, its allies, or, you know, China never had an expansionistic war, you know. But as soon as the Europeans were able to sail a ship, you know, they said, oh, let's put guns on them and let's shift all our armies towards the east and let's conquer the new worlds. Well, China was doing great at that time with their own dynasties and their old things, you know. They were doing, you know, even like, for example, India already tumbled for the British, and then they set their mind further on in Asia, then set their eyes further on in Asia, and well, the rest of the European countries were like, oh my God, you know, the British are getting rich by the minute, by the hour, and they already took India, and they're setting their eyes on China and the rest of Asia now. We should take part in the game as well, you know. So in the end, firstly you had the big other country, which was France, was also participating, for example, very clearly in the second Opium War, and along the way, all the other countries came pouring in. Even the Netherlands has a small history of also partaking in the wars in Indonesia. And even the smaller country over here, which is my south country called Belgium, they even pressured the Chinese emperor to sign a agreement to how to say, to give them Tianjin from now to the rest of eternity, actually.
Did that happen?
A small country like Belgium. Yeah, that happened. That happened.
Wait, Tianjin is a former colony? I didn't know that.
Well, you just look at the buildings. They have a Austria-Hungarian, like a very old colonial building over there. It's very nice preserved.
Are you talking about? Are you talking about the territories, like the concessions?
I'm talking about Tianjin, not Shanghai. They already had concessions over there.
Oh.
But they were really moving towards other places as well. And Tianjin is basically the Belgians. They wanted a piece of the action as well, and they were white as well. So they pressured the government, saying, "Okay, we're gonna attack you if you don't give us that land." Actually.
Wow.
And the thing was, you know, the Chinese emperor already suffered a lot of these foreign aggressions. They say, oh, another big country. Belgium is really small, but oh, another big country, you know, and oh, they're white again. Yeah, let's give them Tianjin. It's just a small place, but this is what happened.
I did not know that Tianjin was a former colony of another. Like, is that on the same level as Hong Kong was, as a former colony of British Empire?
No. The British actually had a very, how do you say, they had lots of experience with colonizing stuff, and they did a very, how do you say, a devious fine job with it.
Yeah.
A very devious fine job.
So, not the same thing.
They actually, it's not the same thing. But for example, if you ever go to Belgium and go to Antwerp Central Station, one of my friends told me actually all the marble and all the nice stuff actually from there, from that central station, was actually hauled over from Tianjin actually. I still have to fact check that, but it was one of the things that was playing in my mind because I visit Antwerp every 3 to 4 months. I have friends over there. It's a nice place. And yeah, it makes me wonder, you know, how did it get there, you know?
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought that up. It's very interesting that you brought up the whole thing about China being the Middle Kingdom. That's why it was called the Middle Kingdom, right? That's why it's known as Middle Kingdom, because it was the central place on Earth at the time. Like literally, human civilization at the peak of human civilization at that time. Well, obviously, if you're a historian, there are several peaks, right? There's different peaks that are happening in different civilizations, right? Egyptians, blah, 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 blah. But at the time, Asian civilization at its peak was China. So we had the best technology. We had the best scholars. You know, we invented a ton of things, right? And European people at the time were like in the dark ages. They were like shitting themselves on the streets and like didn't even have a sewage system. So they just threw their junk on, you know, they just threw their junk out the streets, and they had like the plague and everything like that. So they didn't have any technology. So like China at the time was like pinnacle. You know, you had, again, I'm not about to go in a super long list of the stuff that we invented, but I mean, check it out. I mean, do some research. But we were so technologically advanced that we're just like, man, we're going to chill, we're going to have peace, you know, we're going to have like the whole scholarly era where people come out and we start rapping, and well, you know, that's the origin of rap, is Chinese poetry, you know what I mean? So you had scholars come out and like take their times, you know, take a stroll along the Chinese gardens and then write poetry and then recite them, and talk to birds and talk to the moon and talk to the lake and be like, you're so fine and pretty and all that type of stuff. And then, you know, that's how they would woo the women and stuff like that. So it was like art, you know, poetry, fashion, martial arts, a little bit of martial arts. They didn't have to like go to war too much. So it's like a little bit of martial arts, but mostly it was like studying.
Healthcare.
Yeah,
Healthcare.
Right?
Think about that.
It was a lot of like writing books, writing novels, writing strategic manuals, all that type of stuff. So it was like a good, peaceful time because like they had everything. You know what I mean? The resources were all there. The people were all there. The management was all there. And it's good thing you brought up the thing about, you know, not having an expansionist policy. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm like super pro-China or like super Sino-centricist or whatever you want to call it. I understand there's been certain, you know, incidents where China has tried to, you know, annex Korea or China has tried to invade Vietnam and stuff like that. I'm not saying they were completely innocent, but in terms of applying like a Western style imperialism, colonialism to its neighbors, I don't think China ever did that. China was always like, okay, here's how big we are, right? Like they would send their convoys or they would send their guys over there. They'd be like, okay, see, this is how big we are. You know, this is how big our army is. This is how much resources we have. Like, if we want to go to war with you guys, we could, but we're not going to do that. We like peace for the most part. So we're going to let you do your thing. You can have free control and, you know, free development of your own society and your language and stuff like that. We're not going to try and force anything on you. Just, you know, every year, just send us something. You know what I mean? Send us some gold, send us some food, send us some whatever resource. Just a little bit, pay your tribute a little bit here, and we'll protect you, in a sense. Like, we're your big brother, we'll protect you. You know, send us some princesses and some queens here and there, you know what I mean? And we're good, you know what I mean? We're good. So I feel like, I mean, looking on the good side, I feel like that's kind of cool. It's like, hey, I can deal with that. It's not any different than if you live in society right now and you got to pay your taxes, and you got to pay your whatever medical bills, whatever it is, and you got to pay your income tax. It's the same thing. The government takes care of you, right? They provide you a place. They provide you, you know, with laws and stuff like that. And they protect you. It's the same thing. So Chinese society, they were already so advanced that they did not need to resort to like barbaric things like invading another people's land and taking their resources and raping their women and getting them to sign unfair treaties so that you can rape them some more for resources and for money, and then also colonize their people and force them to speak another language and you know, push your religion on them and then force them to take up your religion and force them to hate themselves and hate their own language and hate their own religion, hate the own skin color that they're in, and then force them to speak English. Like Chinese people never did that. You know, and for any non-Asians listening to this podcast right now, you sound like, oh shit, like, you know, this shit's getting too real. Like I'm about to press a, you know, X button. I want to get out of here. Like oh, this Hoi Wah Ho guy, he's such a racist and blah blah. Like, nah, dude, this has nothing to do with racism. You listen to the history. This is exactly what happened to places in Asia. You know, from places like, you know, the British Empire and whatever, European countries and stuff like that. This is the reality, and this is the history that we live in, right? You, as a non-Asian person, will be listening to this, and you may feel like, oh, you know, that's such a long time ago. It's ancient history. No, it's not ancient history. It's only a few generations removed. We still feel the effects of that even today. So it's not going to take any, you know, it's not going to be anytime soon that this sort of the effects of colonialism goes away. I mean, let me go off tangent a little bit. First of all, why am I speaking English? Right? Let's ask that question. Why do I have to address the rest of the world in English right now? I could be speaking Chinese right now. I could be speaking my own dialect right now. But I can't do that because you wouldn't understand me, and I would need subtitles. So, you know, right then and there is a sign of colonialism. Like, I should be able to speak my own language, and other people should respect it enough to learn my language and then be able to hear me. You understand what I'm saying? But I have to use English because English is now the de facto kind of international language. Who knows in 100 years? But that's the de facto language, and that's the language that we have to learn. You know, there's millions of people in China, there's millions of Chinese people, Asians, whatever, that have to learn English just so that they could speak to foreigners and they could speak to everybody else in the rest of the world. But why is it that, you know, it can't be the other way around? Why is it not that other people are learning to speak Japanese or learning to speak Chinese in order to communicate with 1.4 billion people on the earth? Well, it's because there's a different power dynamic. You're talking about, again, decades, you know, centuries of colonialism, and that language has been spread, and that language has been, you know, widespread and pushed by media, by, you know, political powers and whatever it is, and it's part of the history now. So we have to speak the English, or else other people don't understand us, and that's just, you know, a very woke way at looking at it. So, you know, that's history. So it's not that I'm being hateful against people who are non-Asian or anything like that. It has nothing to do with hate. I don't hate anybody. What I'm saying is, here are the facts. Here's what we live in, and here's what we have to realize, and here's what we have to recognize. So I went off on a tangent a little bit. What was I originally talking about? What was I talking about? Okay, so yeah, Chinese people, you know, the Ming, or not Ming Dynasty, but the Middle Kingdom, right? Acting as like a big brother. Yeah. So they never had to do the Western style imperialism thing. And I thought that was a beautiful thing. And I thought there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm sure there's obviously Koreans and Vietnamese, and, you know, they're gonna feel a certain way about it. I understand that. And my message to our, you know, Asian brothers and stuff like that is just, I think it's better if all Asians work together. You know what I mean? Because you've been at the result of colonialism. We've all suffered from the same result of imperialism. Why not pool your resources together and help each other out, as opposed to, you know, fighting over petty differences? And now you can reflect that with the modern age, with modern society right now. It's happening the same thing. The same thing's happening. You know, the same thing that was happening 100 to 200 years ago, it's happening right now. It just comes in cycles, like you said. People are now taking aim at China because China's coming into the, you know, in the modern era. They're powerful again, right? They're on the rise again, just like they were 200 years ago. And people are pointing their guns at China, and they're doing the same thing again. They're like, okay, South Korea, you know, Japan, you know, Philippines, you know, Vietnam, like, you gotta be on our side. You gotta be on the American side. You gotta be on the whatever side. And China's like the bully. China's the enemy. Like, you gotta be anti-China. And it's like, come on, man. Like, please. Like, that's just a whole kind of game that you guys are playing. Like, any educated, well, unfortunately, a lot of people are not educated, but any educated person can see that this is just proxy wars. This is just, you guys are playing a game because you guys want to get at China again. So it's great that Chinese are well, they just had the summit meeting. They just had the summit meeting where Chinese president invited you know, all the Southeast Asian countries and Middle Eastern countries, and they basically ignored America, and they brought them in for that meeting. Again, I don't want to get into politics and stuff like that. I'm not a politics person, but what I'm saying is they're doing good stuff over there in Asia, and if you've actually visited China, you actually, you know, talk to people there, you actually realize that there's a lot of great things going on within China. You know, other than the censorship, right? Other than and the whatever, there's actually a lot of great things going on in China. The Chinese government is actually doing a lot of great things for their own people. You know, just to give you a couple points, you know, they're going green. I realize that they're doing a lot of things that they're going green with. So, you know, bicycles are free in China. So bicycles are publicly available. You just tap your car, tap your phone, whatever, and you could get on a bicycle and you could ride, and it's literally for free. So they encourage good health, they encourage people to bike, and they encourage people to take public transportation. If you try to register for a car, it's like trying to win the lottery. There's going to be like tens of thousands of people that are going to try to register for a license plate to drive a car, but they'll only pick a handful per month, okay? Because they want to limit the amount of people that can buy cars. So they limit the pollution, right? So then they jack up the prices on parking lot spots. So to discourage people from owning cars and to encourage people in taking either public transit or walking or cycling. So that's good. Those are good things that are doing in China. Of course, in the Netherlands and stuff like that, I'm sure they've been doing that for the last 30, 40 years already. But I'm just assuming. But they're doing a lot of great things. They're doing a lot of great things in China that, in fact, even if you compare it to places in America, you compare it to Canada even, is a very slow evolving, economy. And, well, I don't want to use the word economy, but slow moving lifestyle over here in Canada. There's a lot of things in Canada that are just take years and years and years and it never gets done. Public transport is bad. Traffic is bad. A lot of things that are available in Asia, the subway systems, the super fast subway system, the super fast public transportation systems in Asia, Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, certain big tier 1 cities in China. Fantastic. They're not even available in Canada. They're using some shit that's super old, right? Never works, right? I can't speak for New York City, but I've been to New York a bunch of times. I mean, we all know the New York City subway system is like a sewer. You know what I mean? It's a sewer. Like, that's not like that in Asia. You go to Asia, you go to the subway system there, it's extremely clean. It's extremely efficient. Everything's on time. People do things in an orderly manner. You know what I mean? And it's just a lot of people, it's just ignorance. People have never been to Asia, they never traveled there, they never lived there. They just don't know that there's a lot of great things, in China. There's a lot of great things in Asia. Anyway, I'm going super, super off tangent. So I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was really interesting to learn that part about China. I don't know, a few years back, talking to other Chinese people that, China never needed to do the whole expansionist thing. And, yeah, well, I can understand why. Because if you're like, if you're English, you're British or whatever, yeah, you live on a tiny island. There's nothing there. So, so what are you going to do? You're going to make some ships and invade some countries, of course, because you got nothing on your island. It's tiny.
Yeah, the thing is, when you talk about the British, they already had a very long history of warfare against the French, so they were very good at it, actually. And along the way, they thought, let's not make war, but let's make war with others, so that they went conquering other places. And they exported their democratic system, their colonialism, and basically enslaved. They are quite dubiously proud of the fact that they once had an empire at which the sun never sets, and it was quite true, actually. That makes it all very, very, very weird, actually, because they had so much money and they had so many places, while they themselves are a very small country. This just think about that. They're a small country but able to divide and conquer. That's basically where it came down to.
And they're really good at making other people divide as well. So they're excellent at... Oh yeah, that you use the word. You use the exact word, which is what's happening right now, is that Asians are divided. And largely it's a reason of Western colonialism, Western imperialism. Because they're great at coming in and being like, hey, Filipinos, you don't like the Chinese. You know what I mean? Like, make sure that you remember that you don't like them. And then they'll go over to like Koreans and they'll be like, hey Koreans, make sure that you remember that China is the enemy. All right, you got it? And then they go over to Japan. It's like, hey Japan, you're our lapdog. You know what I mean? You're our little puppy. You gotta listen to what we say, because we nuked you and we put a bunch of military bases in your ass. You gotta like listen to us. Make sure you continue to be the enemy of China and all that type of stuff. Like, you're our watchdog. You know what I mean? Like, that sounds harsh, but that really is reality. This is really reality. It's like the reason why Western, colonialism and imperialism still exists to this day is because of their ability to make Asians divided and make them stay divided. And that's why, comes down to, for a person like me who is very proud of being Asian, I like to see a unified Asian people. You just everybody be friendly with each other, and not to take that on and be taken out of context and be in the wrong way. Not that we don't want to be friends with other people, but I'm saying, in order to be friends with the rest of the world, right? Asians, first of all, have to understand where they come from and their own identity first, and then they're able to make friends with each other first because let's put it this way: we all look the same. You know what I mean? We all look similar. So by association, we're already associated with each other, right? It's not like you go to America and you look at a white person, you'd be like, I can see that you're from Belgium. It's like, no, like I just look white, right? Like I just look white. So I'm seen and attributed as white or whatever. If you want to be technical about it, yeah, I'm European, right? But they don't go up to people and say like, oh yeah, you're European, or you're Irish, or you're Scottish, or whatever. No, we can't tell each other apart until you start asking me questions, right? So same thing with Asians. The first judgment is that, okay, you look Asian, you probably speak an Asian language, and whatever, all the negative stereotypes or the stereotypes that come with it. When people see you, they're like, or they think you're Asian, or they think you're Chinese, or whatever. So if people understood that they'll never be like not Asian because they always look Asian, they need to understand that first of all, and get rid of the self-hate, get rid of the whole divisiveness, get rid of the whole trying to be as American as possible type of mentality, or trying to be as foreign as possible type of mentality. Get that out of their system first. Understand who you are as a person, okay? Understand your own history, understand your own culture, then make friends with your other Asian neighbors because they look like you, and they have similar traditions as you, and they have similar histories as you, and they have similar relationships as you. And that's not saying like, oh, why are you being so pro-Asian and you're being against other people? That's not true at all. Look at EU. Look at the European Union. Same thing. It's not like that's like a bad thing. It's a good thing because they're trying to help each other out because they're all part of that, within that same area, within that same continent, within that same, you know what I mean? They all share the similar histories together. They all share, they do trades with each other. Their economy is tied with each other. So yeah, it would strengthen each other if they had an EU, and which they did for a time. You know what I mean? So that's all I'm saying is that Asian countries, at the result of colonialism, it has been set back, several hundred years. It's beneficial for Asian countries to try and lift themselves up by partnering with each other and ignoring, honestly, the foreign bullies that try to come in and try to separate us. That's really my point. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's really true. That's really true. I'll follow up on that, because I again, not being racist, but just being for the fact that as soon as the whites arrived in Asia, just being at 1700 something, they started to figure out, okay, how do we get to conquer this place? Actually, I'll tell you, the thing is, there was never like an Asian envoy towards the West saying, okay, let's divide these countries. There was never something like that. While when the Europeans had the power, they went to Asia and thought, we see all these riches, we want that. Be proud of the Asian heritage which you have. Either you're Filipino, either you're Vietnamese, Indonesian. Let's go further with Malaysia. Thailand. There's a lot to be proud of. And the thing is, actually, you should regain that pride that you once lost, or you should emphasize it more, because the thing is, the future is in Asia. Let's be very clear cut about that. And the thing is, Westerners who went to Asia, they often had, in the beginning time, they wanted to study and to be friends. That was in the early beginnings with the missionaries, etc. Mm-hmm. But along the way, as soon as they learned your ways, they would be like, okay, we can exploit these. We need money and we can exploit these. Just think of it. I'll tell you this part about Indonesia. Mm. The VOC of the Dutch how do you say, maritime company was the VOC. It brought the Netherlands a lot of riches, actually, but simultaneously it made the Indonesians very poor. Mm. How did it came to be? For example, you're in the old age, and you're from Indonesia. You have your fishery, you have your weaving baskets, or you have your small banking system, whatever. The thing is actually, from one day or the other, Europeans come to your shores and say, now, ma'am, sir, you're my slave now. How would you feel about that? It's like, what? It's unimaginable. And the Dutch actually, how do you say? They extracted so many riches from Indonesia. According to the history books, it's so much actually. It's more than any other company in history ever had. They have enough money that they couldn't count it, and they sort of stopped by saying, this company made enough money for the core members to be rich and not having to work for 7 generations onwards. Just think about it. 7 generations onwards.
Hey, I'd like that too, guys. I'd like that too. I want to grow tall and fat and really big, like 6'5", right? Because I want to benefit off 7 generations of surplus. How about that? So when people make like stereotypical comments about like, oh, Asians are short, Asians are, this and that, well, it's because we were malnutritioned. We didn't have anything to eat. We were poor because, well, foreign powers took it away from us. Anyways, that's my comment. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. No, but the thing is actually, just think about it. And the smart stuff about this company is actually, when it was disbanded, it had 0 on the balance check actually. But the core members were so rich that they started their own companies, and now they're dominating the world. If you look back, all the Dutch banking systems, which are quite well known throughout the world, they came actually from first initial investments from these core families actually that made so much money. It's unbelievable actually. And the thing is actually, yeah, if you just, the sad thing about the story is a lot of Indonesians still see the current day threat as being the Chinese. Well, they shouldn't have been poor a long time ago. If they had just normal trade with China being in the old ages, they probably have had a more steady path towards a development which suited them the most actually. And for me, I picked these specific parts in history because I really like to focus on these parts, because if you look at how the money flew, how the money actually went, everything went to the West. Everything went to the West. So along the way, current day, I think Asians really need to reevaluate themselves, saying, hey, we're rising on the world stage now. It's not just China. It's also Indonesia. It's also Thailand. We're rising on the world stage now. Let's do that properly. Let's have mutual trade. Let's have discussions. And the thing is also with all the politics aside, actually, every Asian country knows that they're on an important breakthrough, and if they muddle this up, if they really want to destroy it for themselves, they should go to war, but they're on a fragile balance now, that if they push through this balance by working through together and by really harnessing each other's strength and powers, they don't need the West. They can grow by themselves. I'm not saying ignore the West, because the West has still have their own innovative ideas, and the technology here in the West is they're quite on a very high level. But if Asians work together, the thing is they're on the verge of a new era actually, which modern day Asian nations can find really good benefit if they really just keep at the moment and just looking at your neighbors, what they do, how do they develop, and really learn from each other, because they're putting their best practices in work now. Let's call it a difficult word, meritocracy. It's really something which is in the Asian nations now. It used to be the old elites in Asia that they were on top, but now they recognize that we have talent in all layers of our society. We have poor people who might have a magnificent brain with magnificent ideas. We need to harness that, getting education for all and getting the best talent from within those ranks. It's very important, and I think along the way, Asia is really becoming a place where people recognize that part, and I was having also an idea that along the way, the other economies are also rising. I think Brazil should be doing better than it should be doing now. But you know the BRICS countries?
Yes,
the
yes.
BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, yeah, etc. You know, and they really have the mindset, you know, we're the underdog. You know, we're not there yet, you know, and we should all band together to get there, to get all the people to be on a good level, you know.
Exactly.
And I really hope that they really push through with these initiatives, and they really see benefit, because the thing is, we don't need wars anymore. Wars would be terrible. Wars will be disrupting the growth and all the fragile advances that they have made. It's still quite fragile, but they need to push through, really.
Absolutely.
That's my quick rant on how it goes.
Yeah, and my comment on that is, I think it starts with, like what I said, not to repeat myself, but it starts with being woke.
Yeah.
Right? It starts with being woke.
Yeah.
And I like how in Western society now, you know, Asians have more of a voice now on the internet, you know, well, the podcast that we're doing right here, on the internet, on social media, things like that. Asians used to not have a voice because, you know, the media is controlled largely by white people. So Asians never used to have a voice. So people were just shut down. They were just shut out of telling their own stories. They're telling their own perspectives about things. And people just didn't know. They just didn't know any better. So Asians themselves didn't know any better. So I think the first element is starting to become woke. Understanding yourself, understanding everything, right? Everything I just said. And once you start becoming woke, you start realizing, okay, the things that I used to think were not cool, or the things that I used to think that I thought were embarrassing, or the things that I think other people bullied me with, are actually just all a part of society trying to tell me that I'm not good enough, or trying to tell me that I'm not cool enough, or trying to tell me that my Asian features are not attractive, or telling me that my skin color is not attractive, or things in my culture are too old and you know, not cool, and whatever, and all these things that are pressuring us from a day-to-day basis, it spills onto society as a whole in general. And you get things happen, or you get you know, situations like this where people, you know, live their lives and they feel inferior because of the power system that's pushed onto them. And this is all going through Asia even today, like in before, and then even still now. So a lot of people that grow up in Asia even today, they have this mentality that, okay, I'm not good enough. Just for being Asian, I'm not good enough. Like, I have to you know, be more whatever, be more Western, you know what I mean? I have to look a certain way. I have to look a certain way, like a Western beauty standard, or I have to talk a certain way, like a Western talking standard, you know? And I'm not saying, hey, don't learn, you know, things outside of your world, and don't learn things outside of your country. Obviously learn these things, right? Learn to speak, you know, 5 different languages. You know, it is only beneficial to you. Learn what's good about, you know, certain countries in Europe, and how they manage their society, and their lifestyle and their productivity and their way of life. Obviously learn those things. Learn the American way of life. Learn is a good thing. Learning, there's nothing wrong with learning. The more you learn, the better it is. The more woke you are, the better. But what I mean is, don't put things up on a pedestal when they're not supposed to be there. Like, identify things that are useful to you, and kind of, you know, like Bruce Lee style, like what he said. Identify things that are useful to you, and assess them, and absorb them, and use them. But you don't have to be so, you know, biased against yourself, because a lot of people grow up in Asia, and they don't understand that a lot of these things have been pushed to them in terms of history, and you know, the Western powers and stuff like that. A lot of people grow up and they feel like they're sympathetic to the West, and they feel like they got the Stockholm syndrome going on, when reality, you know, reality is they actually colonized your ass before. So, you know, people need to snap out of that a little bit. People need to stop, I guess I'll throw this word out there, people need to stop the white worship a bit. You know, learn to love yourself first, and then you can love others. And really it comes down to the thing about self-respect. If you can respect yourself first, then other people will respect you. And I'll put a cap on that, and then I'll end it off that way. So, you know, you're talking about, you know, of course, your identity is unique. Can you tell the viewers or the listeners right now what is the Hakka identity? And like, tell me the history about it. What is so unique about Hakka people? Because I don't know much about Hakka people, and I don't think anybody else knows about Hakka people. So tell me about Hakka people.
Well, to first start with, I think there was a consensus in I think about 1950 or 1980. I'm not sure about that, but it was 1/3 of the Hong Kong Chinese people are in fact Hakka Chinese people.
Okay, so I'm probably Hakka then.
Well, you're a New Territories person.
Well, I'm born in Hong Kong. I was born in Kowloon. My dad is Cantonese, so from Guangzhou, right? And my mom is Shanghainese.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, the thing is actually, yeah, 1/3 of Hong Kong is in fact Hakka, but yeah, they moved away from the Hakka traditions, the Hakka language, and it's you know, my idea. When I firstly, from what I can recall, I think it was in the 1990s, when I first went to Hong Kong, I could still remember, you know, that there was Hong Kong was this wide array of little dialects, because Cantonese, it doesn't encompass the entire province of Canton. It encompasses, Cantonese encompasses a part of Canton region.
Right.
There's Canton province actually has a lot of dialects, and I really love them to my dearest. You know, the reason I speak Mandarin is for me to be able to be on an academic level. For Cantonese, I also speak Cantonese quite fluently. It's because, you know, a lot of my family members are Cantonese, and I like Cantonese media. But I couldn't find any Hakka media, and for me, that's quite a loss. I'll get to the reason in a moment. But the thing is, actually, when I was first, my first recollection when I went to Hong Kong, somewhere in the 1990s, was, you know, you had a lot of people who were speaking different dialects, and it was for me, it was like a colorful array. This is what Hong Kong was about, you know. You have Cantonese, which is leading the way because of convenience, put it this way.
Well, because of Hong Kong media, right? Hong Kong media is a big influence, right?
Big influence, and I like it for what it is, you know. I like the improvised way that they shot action movies. I like the improvised way that they, you know, just did with the means that they had, and they did a great job. You know, they made unforgettable classics. Yeah, really,
absolutely
unforgettable classics. But the thing is, actually, for me, in the media, I never saw a return of any of the other dialects. I have a few family members who are Toishan. Mm-hmm. Toishan is more or less popular. I have a few people who are Wai Tao. Wai Tao is also a small dialect group. Tangka, I recently met actually a few Tangka people who don't really speak the dialect anymore, which is quite a loss, you know, because the Cantonese spoken identity is quite strong in Hong Kong, and they haven't done anything to really make sure that Hong Kong remained the how do you say it? The diverse society as it is, because I think Hong Kong as a strength actually has in its diversity.
You're right. You're right, actually, because I went back recently, very, very recently, just a few weeks ago, and I saw that it was even more diverse than I remembered. I was actually pleasantly surprised. I was like, this is kind of cool. I went back. I saw more, you know, Indians. I saw more Pakistanis. I saw more white people. I saw obviously a lot of mainland Chinese people. I saw some Japanese people too. So I like that Hong Kong. Well, Hong Kong's always been an international city, but I like that it's even more diverse now. I think that's good. It's a good thing. I think it's a strength.
Yeah, definitely a strength. My idea about this, although the media should emphasize it a bit more. The media should also emphasize that foreign, because I get this asked a lot, you know. They say, where do you come from? I say, I come from the Netherlands. Oh, so your English must be very well. You know, something in my mind says, you should not assume that my English is very well or very good. Or, you know, you should not assume that, because, and then I have to explain, in the Netherlands, we speak Dutch. In Germany, we will be speaking German.
Yeah.
In Italy, we speak Italian, you know. So for them, it's like, what? are all these languages? Sometimes people are really like, foreign is English. That's what they think. And for me, it's like, no, wake up. It's not only like that. I have Swedish family members, and the thing is, I cannot speak to them in Swedish. My Swedish sucks, basically. But the thing is, they speak Cantonese. I can speak Cantonese with them. So that's the wide variety of languages and how to cope with other cultures that for me in Europe makes it more convenient. But getting back to Hong Kong, I think the Hakkas contributed quite a lot to very localized economies, but gradually the children, their children and their children's children started, pushing themselves away from Hakka, because there was also a short period. There was also a period in which it was considered like, oh, you might be bad. You might not be educated. You might be a rural person if you speak Hakka. Well, I will tell you this. I am, for example, for my work, I wear a suit and tie, and for most of the time I'm quite well dressed, and I still speak fluently Hakka. I had a few colleagues who used to be Hakka, and they're now speaking all Cantonese, and they were like, oh, the association is very weird for them, But okay, getting back to the old ages of the Hakka identity.
Yeah, where'd they come from? Who were they? Yeah,
in basics, they were considered the nobility and the ruling class of the Tang dynasty. Why is that so? They found old poems and old phrases and these things, and they only make sense if you pronounce them in Hakka.
Wow.
Getting back to more evidence. Korean language, ancient Japanese, and North Vietnamese. It's still a bit under dispute, but North Vietnamese also. They have words that are directly. How do you say? They sound very similar in Hakka.
Give me an example. Now I'm curious. Now I'm curious. You gotta give me some examples.
Okay, cool. If there are any Koreans listening, I'll start counting, 1 to 10. Yeah, I can do that in Cantonese.
So Hana, Dul, Set.
No, well, I'll just count and I'll just let the people analyze it for themselves. Start with, okay, here it goes. Yit, Ni, Sam, Si, Luk, Chit, Pat, Kiu, Sip. That was it. That was counting from 1 to 10.
That sounds
and
almost...
If you're a Korean listener...
Okay, go ahead. What does it sound like in Korean?
I cannot pronounce it in Korean, but it definitely has a large part of similarity. I think...
I thought that sounded more Japanese to me. Ich, ni, san, chi, go, rok, sich, hach, kyuju. That sounds more Japanese to me, actually.
Hakka is connected to ancient Japanese as well.
Yeah!
And the thing is, that's where the Hakkas came from. The Hakkas were the ruling class. When all the societies went to China, because the Tang Dynasty was very open about learning. They wanted to learn. So they invited all these other cultures. Yeah, come in, learn from us. We'll learn from you, but learn from us. And that's where the counting came from.
So you're saying Hakka people were Tang Dynasty emperors?
They were basically that's in short what I say. I know there's a nuance, but yeah, that's basically where it came from. That's my idea, at least. And the history books also support this to a large extent.
Really interesting that you mentioned that, because I heard the same thing from my aunt, and she said that there was a certain dynasty within Chinese history. I'm not sure if it was the Ming Dynasty or if it was the Tang Dynasty, but sounds like from what you're saying, it's the Tang Dynasty. And they were saying how there was a certain dynasty, or she was saying how there was a certain dynasty that spoke non-Mandarin, like spoke Cantonese, for example. I don't know if it's specifically Cantonese or if it's Hakka, but they were saying the same thing that you said.
Mandarin basically existed actually for the last 300 years. Before that, Mandarin was basically a tribe language actually, I think. Yeah. Cantonese is basically Cantonese has 9 tones, and they kept their ancient tones very well. The thing is actually, my theory about this is Cantonese uh, is a descendant of the old languages, but it was mixed with very local tones, very local tones. So the thing was, every word or every sentence or every verse or from the north, which was considered the educational center, that sight through the south, which the south, for example, the Cantonese speaking group would have accepted this poem or this new word, yeah. They would evolve it and mingle it towards more their familiar sounds. That's what developed in Canton. You know, they basically they were always grounded and stationed in Hong Kong or in Kowloon region, and every new word that they got, they modeled it towards their familiar sounds. That's why, for example, in the north you have a lot of the r sound,
Right.
in the south you have a bit more lively sounds. You have a bit more lively, and
Well, it's cleaner.
have also the cut-off tones and also those for the north unfamiliar tones actually. Yeah, what the Hakkas were actually that well, with every dynasty that comes, there's also dynasty that goes. And when the Tang dynasty was toppled, they took their household, their personnel, they took their riches, their royalties, and etc., noblemen and artisans. They took them all the way southwards, actually, and to the Fujian region. And so you have the Fujian roundhouses, the tulos, and they were actually the first. At that time they were nobility, so they had money, so they needed to build defensive structures to be able to defend themselves, and they were using at that time the most latest, newest technology in defensive structures which they could muster. And they built these round, not all around, but they usually are round. And the thing was actually, why are they round? Because they don't have corners to protect. You know, if you fought in Europe and you would have to topple a medieval castle, you would take the corners because those are the most fragile ones. And in these things, you had a round structure, which was like a small fort, which had no corners. So this was one of the novelties that it had.
Hakka invented.
The wave of, yes. It's written in history books, and it's like this. And for me, it's a very sound reason. And even the Japanese pirates, which were quite well known for being heavily armed and battle savvy, they left the Tulos alone. Basically because you had a peasant army inside who could just arrow down because the Japanese warfare was based on getting the center, you know, and taking the center and therefrom conquering all the sides. But the thing is, actually, if you run alongside of a Tulo and wanting to get to the center of these area with a lot of Tulos, actually, there is no center. You know, you can run around until you get shot by an arrow. And so their armies were constantly being waved in, and they're constantly being slaughtered. So eventually they left the Tulos alone, actually.
Interesting.
And that's how Hakka culture actually, for a time, could thrive quite harmoniously over there. Until they noticed that the new dynasty government sent in their how do you say, their sentry units and their police, etc. And they found out, oh, these are the people these are the nobility of the old dynasty. We should wipe them out, you know. So a lot of Hakkas they were afraid, and they went further in southwards, ending eventually in Guangdong region, in Meizhou also a bit, but also in Guangdong region a lot. And this being eventually also being mingled with Cantonese, and also moving southwards towards Malaysia, towards Singapore, towards Indonesia, because they're really afraid, because they had royal blood. And if you have royal blood, you know, and if you're associated with Hakka, then it's like, okay, you know, this is the new dynasty, so we're gonna have to kill you, you know. That's the thing. So the thing was actually they moved downwards, and they also had this was a Hakka Bunti War, actually Bunte, just meaning the locals who were already there, because you had a new wave coming, and there was like fighting for resources. The Hakkas eventually settled for at that time infertile lands in the mountains because nobody wanted, because you cannot have you cannot plant stuff on a slope. But eventually they found innovative ways to be able to plant stuff, have crops and have food and have irrigation on these slopes. So that's probably
in southern China.
One of in southern China region, yeah, not
So
necessarily
Fujian.
Close to Hong Kong, but further upwards.
So Fujian and it would have been Sichuan, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it have been Sichuan?
There are some Hakkas over there. I think
Sichuan is known for mountainous
Hakkas,
regions as well, or rather a region with a lot of hills.
Yeah, okay. Those are the quite high ones, but also local skirmishes, and you don't really need a very high mountain or anything.
Right.
It was also a hilly area, you know, which is quite difficult to have a agriculture on it.
Right.
But even then, they for the sake of survival, they had to make that ground useful for planting soil and anything for this type of thing.
Right, and then
so that's.
You're saying that Hakka people eventually went from that to like all the way to spreading like internationally. You said.
Yeah, well, that was an uprising, and that's where my righteous part comes into play. You know, the Qing dynasty was selling China out on a massive scale.
Yeah.
You know, there are some writings about why and how, but my basic idea, in short, it doesn't. My basic idea, in short, is the Qing dynasty first. They conquered China in probably 1600 something. Mm-hmm. And they had all of China. They were proud, you know. And let's build this court. Let's you know, because they had the riches. They were suddenly they were shifted from tribesmen, warring tribesmen, into nobility. You know, they were the emperors. They were the courts. They were etc. And gradually, you know, they when China was falling asleep, actually, that's the best word to use over here. They were falling asleep. And they sort of got too comfortable with their own courts, and they didn't care about China in total anymore. They just cared about their courts, that their extended family members, and that all their courtesans, and that their nobility was well intact. So they were whatever happened to the large extent of China that they're being attacked, they cared, but not so much. They cared mostly about their courts.
Yeah, they only cared about themselves.
Which had a good lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically my theory on why because in essence, they are amongst the group of ethnic groups of Chinese, but there are Mongols or tribes from the north, actually.
So Manchurians.
So while their beginnings were caring about China, etc., but in the end, they sort of only cared about their small, you know, their
small
lavish lifestyles.
Yeah.
They didn't care about if China was bleeding empty, you know.
Yeah, they only care about their own ethnic group.
And that's when the Hakka Chinese sort of like, you know, we used to be the Hakka Chinese also had a small revival, renaissance, I would use actually, in a Ming dynasty, and so those are the two dynasties which had specifically Hakka influence: the Tang dynasty, a small part of the Song dynasty, I think, but definitely the Ming dynasty. And they were used to, when they were ousted in the Ming dynasty, they were still used to the places in the north. You know, they had their maps, they had their battle plans. They were all generals, actually. And the thing was actually, the Qing dynasty was selling China out by masses. By the day, China was getting poor. So they thought, you know, we need to reclaim that throne. We need to be the righteous ones to reclaim that throne. And they was spearheaded by Hakka generals who wanted to say, okay, we're bleeding empty now, we should retake it now, you know. But the thing was actually, the Qing had help from their friend enemies, put it this way, and they had guns and etc. So there was the peasant army, which was a really peasant army, spearheaded by Hakka generals with all the things that they could muster. They were marching towards Beijing and trying to reclaim actually China as being Chinese. But this.
So for context, for historical.
Back and
sorry, my bad. For historical context, which dynasty came first?
Sorry?
Was it Song and then Song, Tang, and then Ming? Like, tell us the order.
I think it was, okay, from me, a long time ago, there was the Han Dynasty. That's where Han Chinese came from, basically. Then you had a few dynasties, and then you had a Tang Dynasty, was around 900 something, I think a bit before. And then you had I think one or two dynasties, but then you had the Yuan Dynasty. The Yuan Dynasty was a Mongol dynasty, you know, with Genghis Khan, etc. And then you had a few smaller dynasties with a lot of turmoil. And one of the later dynasties from I think 1500 something, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty put a firm staple on China, saying, okay, we're going to close our borders, and we're going to restructure our countries, and you know, we're going to revert to old ways, which was good but also bad. And they basically because they went focusing on healthcare, on arts, on developing themselves again, but they were not fully aware that, you know, in Europe we have a breeding nest of warmongering colonists. You know, they were not really aware of that. So the Ming Dynasty was like, yeah, we have gunpowder, we have an army, but we'll focus on pottery, we'll focus on arts, we'll focus on medicine. Medicine is good, you know, for healthcare.
Right.
So they're really advanced technologies in those things, and this is what a peaceful society would aim for. They would aim for the higher arts. They would aim for having not just a painting, you know, but they would paint with a passion, you know, because they wanted to create an art, actually.
Absolutely.
Not knowing, you know, that barbarians on their borders, that was like, okay, in a few years' time, we'll crumble your country, you know. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But getting back to the dynasty which I'm focusing on is just the switching point of Ming Dynasty towards the Qing Dynasty, and then the end. Yeah? You had the Ming Dynasty, which was the renaissance of the Hakka people, and then they were ousted for the Qing Dynasty. And the remnants of the Ming Dynasty, which has a lot of, how do you say, they're well established in martial arts as well. You find it back in, because the loyalists of the Ming Dynasty also have a certain greeting. You know, you have the traditional right hand fist and left hand folded greeting in martial arts.
Where did that come from? Which dynasty did that come from, you said?
No, it's the most common one. It's from Confucius, actually.
Oh,
it's because
okay.
the right hand is a fist. The right hand is a fist, and I can use it to hurt you, but I'm holding my left hand as a envelopment of that fist,
right?
And paying my respect as I can withhold. Yeah.
Very interesting. I personally did not know that part. I thought it was just a general greeting from you know, coming from Kung Fu, coming from Chinese martial arts.
Well, they have a lot of differences, and I'll tell you, if you're into traditional stuff, just also go to Bak Mei. Bak Mei is one of the few really aggressive martial arts. It's aimed for attack, actually, and it has a specific greeting as well, which has a lot of meaning to it, which I won't delve into, but find it yourself. It's very interesting. But okay, so the loyalists of the Ming Dynasty, they all had their secret hand greetings. Which, if you were encountering an opponent and you would have a quarrel with them, and you would say, "Okay, my kind sir, I will challenge you to a duel," yeah, and then you would do the hand greeting to engage your opponent, and you see that, and you were like, "But you're also a loyalist of the Ming Dynasty." "Yeah, me too." You're like, "Okay, you know, we have greater battles to fight."
Yeah. No, Shaw Brothers films made that. They would travel around. They'd be like, throw up a hand sign. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm part of the Ming Dynasty." Fanting folk me.
Yeah. You know them all. I guess you know them all.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the actual hand signs, but yeah.
Well, just look into them. I'll explain them into detail in another time, maybe. But
yeah,
the thing is,
it's funny because they were basically throwing up gang signs.
They were throwing up gang signs.
The origin of gang signs, right there. Chinese history, gang sign, Ming Dynasty, loyalists.
Yeah, and even if you're from rival gangs, you know, and you could tell by the signs which they had, they were like, okay, you know, we should not be fighting each other. We have greater wars to fight. But this should not happen, you know. So that's the thing. How even the Chinese revered pirates, they even have Chinese pirates. They even have their code of honor and their code of conduct. And there was actually on the turning point of the Ming and Qing dynasty, there was also these captains, you know, who were navy ship commanders. Am I supposed to now turn my loyalty to the Qing dynasty? Fuck that. We turn into piracy, and they turn into vicious pirates actually. But the Qing dynasty initially, with their beginnings, they had good intention for China, as always. You know, every dynasty has good intentions, but it quickly, you know, I think 200 years later, and everything fell into decay. And that's also when about the same time the Hakka Chinese rose again and said, okay, we have to reclaim the throne. We have to get this because we are being invaded. We're bleeding empty. We're being put against each other. We are Chinese brothers, you know, but we are going to put against each other just by, you know, just put it this way: is democracy or communism or socialism, are these Chinese standards? They never were, actually. I could ask any person, you know, it's these are not Chinese standards. These are all European standards. Okay.
And funny,
back to the story.
Yeah. Well, sorry. Hold your thought right there, because funny you mentioned like, okay, you know, Qing dynasty drove out, you know, Ming dynasty, and then people who were Ming dynasty loyalists, including the Hakka people, you know, got driven down to the south and stuff like that. One interesting to note. Oh yeah, and you said some of them became pirates too, right? Is that what you said?
Yep.
So very interesting to note is like during that time, people might not know this, is that then they formed like, you know, the underground secret societies that were, you know, martial arts sects and things like that, and religious sects and things like that were, you know, anti-Qing government, and they wanted to restore Ming dynasty, all that type of stuff. And that's what led to actually the origin of Chinese triads. So people don't people don't, you know, people don't know that, people don't think about that, so they think like, okay, Chinese triads are you know, bad and stuff like that. Obviously, you know, they I'm not saying they're good. You know, they do a lot of crime, human trafficking, drugs, things like that. But originally, when Chinese triads started out, it was meant to be a good thing. They were meant to be sort of like an underground resistance type of people, you know, Ming loyalists, want to overthrow the government, you know, guerrilla fighters, like whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to term them. That's basically what they were. And then, you know, eventually, you know, they lost focus, and then they you know, things happen, and obviously history not being kind to them, and eventually they just moved into just being actual gangsters. But, you know, originally they started out with good intentions, and that's what the origin of triads were, is that they have a term called aiguo, right? Like they love the country, right? They love the country so much that they don't want to see it fall into decay, so they become sort of like the rebel, or they become the rebel faction, which eventually is known as triads. But the origin is that they are patriotic to the country. That's all I want to add.
Yeah. Well, also adding to that, you know, that the triads at that time really had a code of conduct. You know, everybody who was in that triad region must pay tribute to the triad so they can conduct their business. But they wouldn't, like, for example, rob a old lady who is not being able to take care of herself. In fact, there are a lot of triad instances, and a lot of instances in triad history, in which the triads actually support communities, actually. People who are not able to take care of themselves, money was given, you know. And the thing was actually also in terms of justice. For example, if you borrowed somebody's money and didn't pay back, and the people amongst each other, and the triad would know about this, then they would seek out the person, and they would also like being, hey, what's this? So that at the small tribunals also their sense of righteousness was correct in the core, at least. So that's very, very interesting to put as a side note. Yeah. But getting back to the grander part of the story is the Hakka people waged wars against the Qing dynasty, was heavy on the influence of opium, and always listening to their foreign friend enemy, actually, who supplied them with new gadgets, new technology, while the country was robbed blank.
Were Hakka people involved in the Taiping Rebellion?
Yes, definitely. The leader was of Hakka origin.
I see.
And all the generals were Hakkas. They were definitely Hakkas. And the thing was actually the Hakka. The reason why I'm quite easily being able to speak Cantonese and also quite easily being able to speak Mandarin is because Hakka is situated in the middle. It's a quite large language. It used to be quite large language situated in the middle. This meaning I can adapt to Cantonese and I can adapt to Mandarin. And this made them very, versatile. And they had quite big successes until they were pushed downwards, but by, of course, gunpowder and cannons. But they established, for a short period, they established the Taiping. It was called the Taiping Rebellion. But for a short period, they were able to establish the Taiping Kingdom in South China region, actually.
Wow! Yeah,
which encompasses quite a lot, and this was quite a feat. But the thing was, it was ill managed because it was ill managed, and all the, if you have a war, you have a common goal. Once you start, okay, we're not going to take the north anymore. We're going to establish our kingdom, okay, but you take this part, and I'll take that part. But the thing was, the common goal was gone, so the focus was like really being self-centered again, and that people started doing their own stuff, and this is how the kingdom actually fell also, because everybody was doing their own stuff again. The common goal for toppling the Qing dynasty was lost. It was not toppled. So with that mission incomplete, actually, they went back and established their kingdom. When the Taiping Kingdom, Heavenly Kingdom fell, the Hakkas knew, okay, we're in deep trouble now. Some stopped speaking Hakka, some changed the surname. You have the infamous Black Flag Army, which was a rebel general, which went to North Vietnam, and that's where Hakka people in North Vietnam should be. There are actually, right now, there are still descendants of this Black Flag Army, which was like a rock hard, like going crazy type of army that was put on for the most difficult missions, but they pulled it off every time. So it was like, wow, these are the old ages, and also a lot of the old traditional martial arts are encompassed in the Hakka lexicon of martial art. For example, you have a style which is called beggar style. It's or vagabond style. I don't know if you ever heard of this.
Yeah, Hong Kong movies, actually. Man, they make movies out of everything. So like what you just mentioned, Black Flag Army and all that stuff, that was all in Wong Fei Hung 1, Once Upon a Time in China 1. And you're saying beggar style, yeah. Beggar style, So Hak Yi. So Hak Yi is, Jiu Man Chuk. Sorry, I'm probably saying his name wrong. Vincent Zhao played So Hak Yi. Stephen Chow played So Hak Yi. Beggar So.
Yeah. Yeah. And the interesting thing about what I know about the beggar style is actually it also has the idea of winning for whatever cost. Because as a beggar, why did they become beggars? Because they were high-ranked officials who were really like not wanting to do anything with the war again. They wanted to move away from the war. This was actually before the Ming Dynasty, actually, or during the Ming Dynasty. I'm not sure, but anyway. They moved away from warfare. They said, okay, we have a lot of these knowledge of warfare, etc., and I don't want these politics anymore. That's basically also the Taoist way of doing. You're not going to choose A or B. You're going to walk away and let A and B fight for themselves, and come back when it's peaceful time or not. This is a very Taoist way of thinking.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Well, well, from a Western point of view, actually, I can imagine that you have to choose factions, or you have to choose sides, for example. But basically, what
I'm not saying
the
you have to
beggar
choose.
style.
I'm not saying you have to choose sides, but I guess in the context of, okay, something's going on in the world, right? Some injustice is happening, right? And are we just gonna sit by and let it happen? That's the part I don't agree with, right?
Ah, okay. No. That's true. But I'll tell you the other side of the story is actually when two countries fight, it's probably not your war. You
Right,
know?
right,
If
of course.
the Netherlands fights with Belgium regarding, the taste of chocolates. The Netherlands is better with chocolate. No, the Belgians are better. And let's go to war. Because our chocolates are better. No, it's not our fight. It's not my fight. I don't care about your chocolates.
Well, yeah,
You know?
yeah.
That's the
In
thing.
in that sense, yes, of course.
Yes. But the probably the interesting also adding to this information is also that they had a lot of knowledge of alchemy, black alchemy and white alchemy, and they say, well, this contributed to the part of ninjutsu also, actually, that the ninjas have very intricate knowledge of how alchemy works.
I see.
Well, they say, well, probably is also because these people who are like weary of warfare, and they just went to other countries and started practicing the art there, and this evolved for a small part, contributed to ninjutsu also.
Wow.
But once the Taiping rebellion was raging, they were really needing recruits, and they were also recruiting beggars up in their ranks because they had advanced knowledge of very unorthodox warfare and an unorthodox way of approaching stuff. And they were really, how do you say, they had a respectable rank in the army, reinstated, put it this way.
So it's
And,
interesting. Actually, so I want to kind of like put a stamp on it and wrap it up a little bit. So is there any final things you want to say about Hakka people? And then I'll end it off with a question for you.
Good. Well, I would like to see a good balance of the return of Hakka as a language which is spoken, and I would also like to see more people active in the media because it's inside you. It's your identity. It's your, how do you say, your colorful identity of within the Chinese ranks, actually. And like Cantonese, like Wenzhounese, like Shanghainese, they have their own specifics, and I would like to see Hakka also have their respectable level of Hakka-ness back again.
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring that up, and I'll wrap it up for you based on that. Mandarin
Sure.
being such a strong influence, right? Beijing being such a strong influence with the government and everything like that. Mandarin being the de facto Chinese language within China. Obviously, it
No problem
erases
with that. Good.
it erases a lot of the local dialects, local cultures, and stuff like that because. New generations, babies that are born in China, they're only going to speak Mandarin. So they're not going to be able to speak, Wuxi dialect or, Suzhou dialect or, Shanghainese dialect and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I do feel like there's somebody, right? And I don't know who that would be, that would have to be somebody from, the Hakka lineage or somebody from the Shanghainese lineage, whatever it is. Locally from there, they have to produce their own books and their own media and whatever it is. They have to come up and do that for themselves there because or actually it might take a foreigner, right? It might take a foreigner that fell in love with a certain part of the culture in China or the certain language in China. They fell in love with that thing. And then they try and preserve it because they see an importance in preserving it. Whereas a person that is, on the ground level living in China, they don't see the importance of it because they don't live outside of the thing. They're just living within that ecosystem. So they think, oh, whatever, it's just part of everyday life. It doesn't really matter to me.
Actually, Japanese scientists are really like trying to get, how do you say, archiving and recording all the old tones of Hakka because they know it's certainly part in their in their old heritage. It certainly is. There's part in that because I can list well, I have a list on my computer with all the words that sound near similar to Hakka in Japanese. So they have the money, they have the time, and they have the academics for it. And there are a few Japanese scientists who are really looking into Hakka culture because they say, well, it is probably the origin tone of ancient Japanese.
That's really,
And
really
just
interesting.
adding to your story.
I would think like Japanese people are kind of rooted in their political sort of ways, and they kind of like don't want to admit that they are not actually from Japan, that they're like ethnically a different group of people and stuff like that. So it's interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I just want to add for that, I understand the importance of Mandarin and the power which it currently has. I've been to Thailand, and people, if you don't speak Thai and you don't want to speak English, you can speak Mandarin. And it's more accepted nowadays. I think, wow, this is great. I even met Cantonese people over there, by the way. But understanding that Mandarin is the overall language, and I understand that Cantonese has a very strong and very likable media influence. I really like that the Cantonese have really found and found that identity within China also. But just my idea for it is, for example, Zhao Yunfat, Zhao Yunfat.
Yeah.
He's Hakka.
Yeah.
And, Leslie Chung, the singer.
Yeah.
He is also Hakka.
Yeah.
But I think that somehow they have suppressed that identity, and I would like that to be a bit more balanced in the open. I'm not saying, oh, let's overlap and let's do mass media. No, not like that. I would like to see a more balanced view. That if people want to have Hakka media, they're able to do that.
Yeah. No. It's great that you brought that up, because now that you're bringing this up, okay, now we can't end it. Now I gotta keep going. So. You mentioned that you like the fact that Hong Kong media, has kept Cantonese identity alive and everything like that. I totally agree with you, and let me get into this for a second, because okay, I'm from Hong Kong, so obviously I'm going to be proud of my Hong Kong identity. But when it comes to media, right? When it comes to media, obviously I'm also involved in media as well. So when it comes to media, here's a huge problem I have with China. So Chinese media is so backwards to me. Right, and I've been into China, and I have mainland Chinese friends, and I've talked to them and stuff like that, and they largely agree with me. They're like, Chinese media is very kind of one tone, right? It's always like, okay, let's do some historical courtroom dramas, historical, dramas based on like the courts and the emperors and stuff like that, and then any TV show or whatever, it's always like, okay, Japanese are the enemy. Okay, so it doesn't allow for artistic freedom because of censorships and stuff. So it doesn't allow people to really, truly talk about what they want to talk about, right? What they truly feel about the state of life, existentialism, state of the country, things like that. They can't talk about anything like that. So they always just go back to the same old tired stories, right? So Chinese media, in fact, is just doing a really shitty job at, just making good art, right? That they're really bad at making good art is because art is supposed to reflect real life. And they can't make any art that reflects real life because of censorship, because of the political tones. So that's why...
I'll fill you in on this.
Yeah.
But continue.
But,
okay, you're finished? Well,
no. I'm not finished yet.
Yeah?
I'm not finished yet. So...
Continue.
So the difference is, when Hong Kong became, one of the colonies, along with Macau, but Hong Kong was very unique in the sense that, okay, after it was British colony, yes, British colonization is a bad thing. Yes, I understand that, blah, 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 blah. But, let's look at it in terms of the positive side. Let's look at, okay, what has British colonization done for Hong Kong? And in a lot of ways, it has done a lot of positive things. So obviously, with law, with education, with, the way things are run, it's much more advanced. You can say, again, people from mainland China, they're going to try and dispute this, and they're going to say, no, that's not true. But my argument is, and here's my proof of this. I'll just prove it to you. Like, I've been to, several cities in China now. I've had mainland Chinese friends who've never visited Hong Kong before, but once I have one mainland Chinese friend who's very, very, very proud to be, from Beijing, China, right? And, he's very, very cocky, right? With his, being proud of China and everything.
Okay.
So the second he stepped foot into Hong Kong, he fell in love with it. He's like, Hong Kong's my favorite city, right? So basically he did a 180. He's like, no, I'm super pro Beijing, I'm super pro China. And then the second he stepped into Hong Kong, he's like, oh my God, like this is what the true potential of Chinese civilization can be. So once he got there, he fell in love with Hong Kong and fell in love with the great things about Hong Kong and everything like that. So then I was pointing the finger at him. I was like, hey, you see what I mean? Like, you talk a lot of shit about, British colonization being a bad thing and things like that. And I get it from a historical standpoint. I know it's not the nicest thing, but it also brought a lot of, and I don't want to sound like, Stockholm Syndrome person here right now, but what I mean is it brought a lot of technological reform and advancements and society reform and advancements. And in a way, and let me get back into the media part real quick, in a way, because it brought a sense of stability and prosperity to the region, to the city of Hong Kong, to the region of Hong Kong, it allowed Hong Kong arts to thrive and evolve. And it goes back to the art topic now. Yeah. So for art to develop, the economy has to be good. So with the economy being good, it allows people to pursue art. And then when it allows people to pursue art, that's when you start getting things that become artistically significant and culturally significant. And then when you're able to start producing works of art that become culturally and artistically significant, that contributes back to your personal identity and personal history, that's when you start, getting yourself into that golden age, that flow era where everything you touch is gold and it starts influencing the entire world. And we have to talk about Hong Kong cinema, okay? Because Hong Kong cinema and Hong Kong stars are completely on another level when it comes to Chinese culture than Chinese stars and Chinese media. It's a complete difference, okay? So when it comes to Dynasty, when it comes to Dynasty Lifestyle Podcast, when it comes to Dynasty as a brand, everything like that ties together. It all ties together. So for foreigners, for Americans, for anybody, that's not Chinese, the first thing that they were contacted with, that they got in touch with Chinese culture, was from Hong Kong. It was produced from Hong Kong. It was films from Hong Kong. Kung Fu films from Hong Kong. Action movies from Hong Kong. They were all Hong Kong Chinese talent. They were not talent from China. They're talent from Hong Kong. So, Chow Yun-fat, right? John Woo, right? The Killer, A Better Tomorrow, all that, Heroic Bloodshed, all Hong Kong Chinese movies. Obviously, John Woo himself is a Taiwanese person, but he got his movie start in the Hong Kong film industry, right? You want to go back even more, Shaw Brothers, right? The whole Hong Kong Kung Fu film craze that swept America, 70s, 80s, whatever, okay? Bruce Lee, right? All those people are from the Hong Kong movie industry. It was the Hong Kong movie industry that propelled them to that level. You want to talk about Jet Li, right? A hero in China, right? He wasn't a hero in China at the very beginning. In the very beginning, he was making like a few renminbi per day in his Shaolin movies. He was broke. He was like, no, I had to find a better way to do this. So he came over to Hong Kong, signed some contracts with some Hong Kong movie companies, and then he found superstardom in the Hong Kong film industry with Once Upon a Time in China. And then, boom, he was a household name. So, Chinese people from the mainland love to argue that, like, hey, Hong Kong people, this and that, like, you need to be, you need to check yourself. You need to come back into Chinese society and stuff like that. Yeah, that I agree with. But at the same time, you guys are doing a shit job with Chinese media. You understand what I'm saying? The Chinese mainland movies that you make, the Chinese mainland TV shows that you make, none of it is deep. None of it is deep. None of it is creative. It's all the same shit, same shit, same shit. People are tired of that. Why do people watch Hollywood movies? Why do mainland Chinese people flock to Hollywood movies? Or why did mainland Chinese people flock to Hong Kong and they flock to watch Hong Kong movies? It's because it's creative. It's artistic. There's real meaning in there. because we're allowed the artistic freedom to do whatever we want. If we want to talk shit about countries, or we want to talk shit about we want to criticize our own government or whatever, we're allowed to do that. If we want to talk about triads and we want to say how macho they are, we want to say how cool they are, we can say that. But Chinese censorship is like, no, you can't say that. You can't show Chinese triads in a cool way. Okay, well then a lot of the machoism is gone. A lot of the masculinity is gone. Right? So you can't be like, show a vicious, violent, triad character or a rebellious, Chinese hero because he can't be rebellious, because that would mean you're causing rebellion against the Chinese government. No. If we want to make a main character, he has to be heroic. He has to be pro-China. He has to be like a government hero. He has to be a government servant. That's it. He can only be rebellious to outside forces, but he can't be rebellious to his own Chinese population. So that there lies in a paradox, there lies in a conspiracy, there lies in a problem. Because this all ties back to Chinese Kung Fu now. So it means, okay, you have to train Chinese Kung Fu, you have to do Chinese Kung Fu, but if you say anything bad about Chinese Kung Fu, you're off the radar. Like, we're not going to support you. So that's a self-fulfilling poison. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, it's a self-fulfilling poison. So, which is why it's so important that Hong Kong is on a world stage. It's so important to have a place like Taiwan where other viewpoints can thrive, other viewpoints can survive, and it acts as a check. It acts as a quality control, so to speak, a mental checkpoint, right? So you can't be brainwashed by your own Chinese media because, hey, here's a check. Here's a Hong Kong media. Here's a Taiwanese media. Here's some real artistic talent coming in from there. It's like an artistic check. It's like, you got to be on this level. You know what I mean? In order to pass the artistic checkpoint and be like, okay, this is legit. This is authentic. You know what I mean? And that's not to say, okay, you got to be, okay, Hollywood recognized, or you got to be like Cannes Film Festival recognized. You got to be French recognized. I'm not saying let's use Western standards and put it on Chinese media and put it on whatever to try and make it seem like it's more Western, try and make it seem like it's more high quality. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, in order to get to that higher level of quality, there's got to be competition. There's got to be, you have to, there has to be freedom.
Be challenged.
There has to be freedom, is what I'm saying. There has to be freedom in art in order for art to also challenge itself. So there has to be a healthy ecosystem of competition. So the Chinese media suffers from this because of a self-censorship. There's like, okay, you can't challenge anything, right? But that's why Hong Kong media was so good at the time. They're not good anymore, but that's why Hong Kong media was so good at the time, and it produced all these Hong Kong stars, all these Hong Kong media, all these Hong Kong influences, right? Anything that you name, right? If you're a foreigner, if you're a guy living in Europe, if you're a guy living in America, you name all these stars that you saw back in the day that influenced you into Hong Kong culture, into Chinese culture, that influenced you into Kung Fu culture, all comes from Hong Kong media. Like, let's not pretend here. Let's not beat around the bush here. It's all Hong Kong media. So that's the importance of having other identities, right? So when everybody gets swept away, in Mandarin or mainland Chinese identity, and these other identities get swept away, and there's no artistic freedoms, there's no free thinking, that's when it cripples, I don't want to say it cripples society, but I would say it cripples, at the very least, it cripples culture, and it cripples art, okay? And people underestimate that. People think like, oh, art, it's just for a bunch of sissies who can't do anything in society, who can't contribute to society in a tangible way. They just make art. Art is like garbage, nothing. No, my argument is art is actually more important than you think. Art is the thing that shapes cultures. Art is the thing that shapes societies, at least a very large part of it. So I think it's completely simplified. I think it's completely simple way of thinking. Okay, unsophisticated way of thinking. If you're gonna say, okay, art doesn't shape societies, art doesn't contribute to societies, I think a large part of societies, a large part of social engineering comes from art. So in fact, I would say art is extremely important. Obviously, you want to support yourself, you want to support the people from an economical from an economy standpoint first, right? So once the economy is established, right? So let's say, you know, China currently, as an example, the economy is established now. Now art is where they need to do the catching up, okay? Because they're years behind. You look at Korean media, you look at K-pop, Korean movies and stuff like that. They're doing an excellent job. They're doing a way better job at telling their stories, representing their Korean media, their Korean stars, their Korean culture. Look at how huge it is, right? Look at how huge that other countries have to watch Korean shows and Korean movies and stuff like that. And they can tell their own stories. And they can shape societies because of that. And anyways, going off on a rant is, so you talk about, you know, ethnic influences from you know, certain local groups and dialects and stuff like that. I'm proud Hong Kong. I gotta tell you about Hong Kong movies and how we influence the world. And that's basically how it is. So the most of the known world right now, they've been feeding off of Hong Kong Chinese culture for the last 20, 30 years. So that's the Chinese culture that they know. I'm thinking we need to push beyond that and we need to continue that, right? So with the new Chinese money now, right? With the new Chinese rich people now, they're investing so much money into movies and stuff like that now. They gotta invest properly. They gotta make the high quality movies, not the same garbage stuff that comes out and is produced by Hollywood, you know, Hollywood film producers. And Chinese people have no clue what they're doing on the media side, so they just throw their money out there and they're like, okay, make us a Hollywood movie, right? And they end up putting in there like your typical white protagonist, right, saving China or something like that. You know, that's BS. That like is part of the Hollywood agenda that we touched on in episode 1. We don't need that. Chinese people are tired of seeing that shit. We want to make real Chinese media that speaks to Chinese people, right? We want to make real Asian media that speaks to Asian people with Asian heroes that are refreshing, that tell our own stories. And we don't have to be subjugated to Hollywood way of telling our stories. We don't need that. We can tell our own stories. We can be independent of that. We can be proud of that. And that's all I'm saying. And Chinese media has ways to go. Because of their censorship, they need to, you know, deal with that. They have to work with themselves on that. And if they can't solve that, then hey, you know what they do? They come to Hong Kong and they make a movie, right? They come and do a Hong Kong co-production and they make a Hong Kong movie. So there's still a couple of strong Hong Kong filmmakers. There's still a couple of strong Hong Kong movies that come out nowadays, right? Even though the output has slowed a lot since the 90s, the output has slowed a lot. But there's still quality films that come out and do their thing, right? And so
Can I add some info to that?
Yeah.
All right. No, the thing is actually, I hear a story and I agree with it to let's say 99%, really 99%. It's maybe a little bit nuanced here and there. But the thing is actually, at the time, the British actually also had an agenda for Hong Kong, and they actually let Hong Kong economy thrive in the last 20 years actually of their reign actually.
Okay.
Because create the Hong Kong, which would be by inheritance, if when China returned to Hong Kong, would be vastly different. You know that I call this to a large extent the layers of separation, because they create layers of separation. Cantonese, Mandarin, the movies. Traditional Chinese versus simplified Chinese, etc. You know, they let the economy thrive for the last 20 years to create a identity which would be largely different from that of China, actually.
Okay, interesting perspective.
Yeah. Okay, getting back to the other side. Getting back to the other side of the story. In 1980, when China was just opening up, you know, the thing was actually China was just opening up. They wanted. They could see if they continue with their how do you say, their governance, which was rooted in old-fashioned communism, that it would go nowhere. Basically,
right.
That they wanted to have the economy which could, how do you say, challenge or be at least on a growing level with the West, while still maintaining parts of their socialistic, communistic system. Okay, good. The thing was actually, in 1980, you could not take one newspaper from the border of Hong Kong to China. You could not do that, basically. You know? Just look at 30 years' time where they have gotten through. You couldn't have gotten newspaper. One newspaper would have gotten you in a lot of trouble. Yeah? Just see how the progress has been made during the years. And my estimation, which actually is an expansion of your story, China was afraid of anything foreign. So even that newspaper would have been a threat for them. Nowadays, they're getting comfortable with seeing that a newspaper wouldn't overthrow the government or wouldn't cause mass turmoil.
Right.
You know? There have been, put it for better or worse, they have been used to chaos for 200 years. They're tired of chaos.
Yeah.
You know? So that's why they are slowly moving towards a more open system. But they have to do it on their own terms. You have to show them, but they have to do it on their own terms. They have to accept it.
And I agree with that. I agree with that. I'm not saying, hey, there's a problem with the Chinese government. I actually think they're doing a pretty good job. I mean, I don't live there, but from the things I've seen, from the things I've heard, from the things that I've learned traveling, I feel like they're doing a pretty good job, because you have to understand it's like so many people there, right? There's so many people there, and there's a lot of problems. But, you know, I would say they're doing a pretty good job.
They keep China together. Yeah. Now, every day that they keep China together is a blessing for the world, you know? Because what would happen if you start having factions, you know, the neighbors would certainly benefit or benefit of the turmoil, actually, because China has been used to turmoil. We probably won't see that, because I ask people, when I talk to people, and they say, yeah, China's on the rise now, blah, 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 you know, it's going very well, blah, blah, blah. And then I ask them, have you ever questioned yourself why China now is getting on the rise? And what happened in the blank 200 years, actually? And then they start thinking, oh yeah. Then things start to rise, you know, that like they have been, putting it back into recent terms, they have to get used to the fact that there are so many colors to the world, because they were scared shitless of anything foreign, actually, you know. So the thing is, actually, if they get used to their own terms, you know, that they're able to say, okay, we can let go of that. Nowadays, take a newspaper along, nobody cares, you know. But just think of it this way: a newspaper now, I mean, a newspaper in the 1980s till the internet of today, it's being monitored, and they also say it's being monitored. They don't sneak around and saying, oh yeah, we're not watching, or maybe not, you are being watched, you know. That's the thing. But along the way, if they understand that softening up does not mean falling apart of the country, because a long time ago, and get this, China was the first democracy in Asia.
Yeah.
It had an elected president. But that didn't work on their terms at that time, you know. They had massive debt, they had all kinds of troubles, and that didn't work for them.
Yeah.
They tried it. It didn't work, you know. So the thing is, you must let them, you must point the way, point the direction, and show that for example, you know, the bootleg versions of all the Hong Kong movies in the 1980s till the 1990s were readily available in China, you know. And people, you know, they need to gain time and gain the creativity, and need to gain the experience of how stuff works along the way. And I already see this, actually, but a very grassroots. You know, don't kill the grassroots. But the thing is, that they already are moving very slowly, and they must find their identity within that media. You know, they also, in terms of, for example, in anime, they recently had made a few big strides with a few anime. It's not Japanese-like, it's also not Korean-like, but it's typically Chinese, you know. And they had, you know, once they had Kung Fu Panda, you know, Hollywood, DreamWorks, you know, it was a big hit in China. Chinese thought by themselves, by reflection, why can we ourselves not do that? Why is that not possible? So you made them trigger themselves, thinking, okay, there needs to be, there are stories. We're a big country. There are stories over here, you know. We need to harness those. And I agree with you that they have a lot of these how do you say, running of the mill series, etc. You know, and they're getting tedious. But on the other hand, you know, if you're used to American media or used to Western media, you also kind of figure out how the plot works. And figure out there's also
of course. And I'm not saying I'm not saying by any means that like, oh, these Hollywood formulas are anything new. No. In fact, they're really, really, really old. And if you want to talk about getting to Hollywood films, I'll just for 1 minute I'll say a lot of the Hollywood movies that come out these days is just regurgitated trash. Okay, and it's just like remake this, reboot this. Oh, what comic book character can we grab out that's like kind of original, but really it's not? Like, how many goddamn superhero movies do I have to sit through to get to an actual quality film here? Does anybody make films anymore? Right? So, like, Hollywood had its golden age, and I don't feel Hollywood is anywhere near that anymore. They might come back, who knows? But, you're talking about Scarface, you're talking about Godfather, you're talking about like films from that era. Those were real films. Those are classic films where they're telling a story, right? They're not necessarily in a formula, right? They're not necessarily as a good ending. There might be a bad ending, you know, whatever it is. But nowadays it's like, formula this, formula that. And I'm not saying, hey, China, you know, come up with some, like, you know, copy some formulas and you know, do it the Hollywood way. You gotta figure it out and do it their own way. So I agree with you. I like I said. So let's wrap this up. I have one final question for you, and I think this is gonna be an interesting one because I want to know maybe if you know this or not. So if you don't know this, it doesn't matter. Like I'll try and find out. I'll try and find out by some other means. But we talk about like, okay, over like 50, over 60 ethnic groups in China. What fascinates me, what interests me is not only do I want to learn about each and every one of these ethnic groups, which will obviously take a lifetime, right? But on a very base level, I want to ask you, what group of people are known for what group of thing? I'm curious to know about this. So I want to start off with what I already know, and then hopefully you can confirm and you can kind of add to it, right? So, Qiujiaonese, right? Qiujiao people, right? Qiujiaonese.
Yeah.
They're known for being gangsters. Because they came from a place that didn't have anything. Political turmoil, economical turmoil. They went down south to Hong Kong, just like Scarface went from Cuba to Miami. A famous Qiujiao person of Qiujiao descent was Limpy Ho, Bai Ho. So we kind of share the same last name, but not exactly. But you know, mine is Ho, but his is Ho. So, but written in English, whatever, it's the same word, H-O. So he was known as Bai Ho, Limpy Ho, because he was a feared gangster who had a limp, like his leg limped. So he was, you know, all the Chinese gangsters, all the Chinese triads, they came from Qiujiaonese, right? So that's one interesting group of people, right? Qiujiao dialect, Qiujiaonese, known for being triads and known for being businessmen. And I think they're known for being bankers as well. So Shanghainese, right? People that come from Shanghai, you know, sort of to the north, right? Northeast. You know, a little bit in the middle, maybe you can kind of say. Maybe it's not really like true north, but like, you know, somewhere in the middle, but East China, right? So Shanghainese people, they're known for being businessmen, right? Really good business people. And they're known for being in the fashion, in the textiles. So big on textiles, big on fashion, and big on being business.
Yes.
Right? Big on being business. And to get even more into that, I heard from what I've been told, the people from Ningbo, if I'm saying that correctly, the people from Ningbo, which is just outside of Shanghai, those are the really, really smart business women that come from there. Really, really good with numbers, really, really good with finances, really, really good with business. They come from a Ningbo. I don't know why, which is why I'm interested to know why exactly. But it's like certain regions, they produce certain, you know, tribes of Chinese people, and then they're good at certain things. It's pretty interesting. So what else do I know? So Qiujiaonese, Shanghainese, people from Ningbo. That's kind of to the extent of my knowledge. That's it. So anything else can you tell me?
The Tanka people, they're usually known for boating, and they have their villages on boats, and they're situated in, well, the most watery parts of Hong Kong. Any characteristics? I'm not really sure about any characteristics.
Is it the boat people you're saying?
I can speak for my... Yeah, they're Tanka people.
Tang
They have their own
Ka.
language too.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they made a movie out of that recently.
And, yeah. I saw a title coming by about Tanka people. Quite nice, I think. I think the idea is quite nice that they get an audience, you know, that they have a moment in which they say, okay, this is us, you know, and we're part of Hong Kong as well. We're part of Guangdong region, and we're part of China.
Yeah, the boat people. I think Aaron Kwok played the role.
Yeah,
Guo Fu Sing played the role of the boat people, I think.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you know, you have a big star representing them, which is nice. I just think that it's like a, you know, it's an idea that you get included into the larger part and not be forgotten and not be shoved away, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I can say for the Hakka people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that, you know, and we're quite being known for, for better or worse, being quite traditionalists. You know, we like traditions, even with dining etiquette. You know, we're quite traditional with that, and we have our you know, a little how do you say, a little characteristics within history, and which makes us in a lot of ways we're quite within China, the gatekeepers of the old traditional way of Chinese, actually.
Mm-hmm.
For better or worse, actually, I must say this. You know, for example, you know, my household, my family, we're quite specific on how you hold your chopsticks and how you behave yourself during the dining. It doesn't mean that it's like calm or anything. You know, it's lively, it's fun, it's tasty, and you have comments. But also, you know, you must know your position on the table, and you must respect the elders. That's to start with. And also chopstick etiquette, how you do that, you know, it's well preserved within our how do you say, our specific language group, within China. I can agree with you about the Ningbo people, actually, the Ningbo region. I met a few people who happen to be women, who happen to be very good business people, actually. It's quite confirming. Quite confirming.
I'm trying to understand why that is. Like, what made them do that? What made them become good at that?
Yeah, I don't have an explanation for it yet. It's quite interesting that you asked me, because I've seen it not confirmed. I've seen it happening, but it's not confirmed by somebody else. And in this case, you are confirming it to me, and I confirm it back. You know, which is quite interesting. Let's see. Well, yeah, they have a few regions here and there. I think that the Shanghainese, you know, they're fashionable, and they, you know, that they really are setting themselves as the gatekeepers or the main representatives of fashionable China. You know, you have a brand called Shanghai Tang, I think, and they're really trying to keep the standard up of being, we're the ones who are fashionable. You know, you be the rest, but we're the ones who are fashionable.
It's interesting you brought that up because Shanghai Tang, for the longest time, I really liked their clothing, but their price point is way too ridiculous. It's their price point is like, you know, if you're like really rich and you're bored and you got nothing to do and you want to buy a $500 t-shirt, yeah, sure, why not? So for the longest time, I'm like, damn, I really love this modernized Hanfu, this modernized Chinese clothing style, whether it's the Manchurian style or the Hanfu style, you know, clothing from the Han people, Han Dynasty. I really enjoy that style of clothing, you know, the modern Chinese clothing, and I really wish there was more of that. And I really wish it was more accessible to, you know, not just people in China, but accessible to people outside of China, foreigners and stuff like that. So I've been, for the longest time, I've been seeking that out, right? I wanted to get to it, and of course with Dynasty and everything like that, I want to make my own, you know, modern Hanfu and custom Hanfu and stuff like that. And you know, we just launched the Neo Dynasty collection, so we finally, you know, after months and months and months of work, we were finally able to do that. So I feel like I was able to contribute to Chinese society in some way by taking the great looking style clothes that come out of Shanghai, come out of Chinese culture, turn that into like a modern style where you're able to wear it, you know, in to work, wear it casually, wear it to formal parties, wear it to business meetings, wear it to everyday life, right? So that it doesn't look too gimmicky, yeah, exactly. It doesn't look too corny, it doesn't look too like Chinatown, you know what I mean? So I took like the modern styles.
Stereotypical.
Yeah, stereotypical. I took like the modernized Chinese clothing styles and a little bit Japanese, a little bit Korean as well. And I released that in the Neo Dynasty collection. So, I mean, you know where to get it. Check it out, www.dynastyclothingstore.com. So, really, I was able to you know, take part of that and push that out there into the rest of the world and get people to recognize what modern Hanfu is about. And I personally own a lot of those pieces. I personally dig it. I personally wear it. So I love it, and I was hoping to spread that out there into the world, spread Chinese culture a little bit more, and also I'm sure other people out there would love it and appreciate it as well. And I'm sure other people who go to Chinatown and try to get these kinds of, you know, Chinese type of clothes, I think they as well as me, as I would know that a lot of the clothes that you see in Chinatown and stuff like that, they're kind of like, you know, low quality. You know, low quality polyesters, you know, stuff that doesn't really fit that well, stuff that's not really silk but pretends to be silk, you know, and people are, you know, people don't get to see the real beauty of the Chinese fashion or the Chinese style fashion. So I was able to, you know, hopefully bring justice to that and show people the Asian modern style retro fashion and bring it to the world. And yeah, I must say a lot of people actually, it's being very well received actually. We only launched it for a few days, but we're getting a lot of, yeah, we're getting a lot of attention. We're getting a lot of orders actually. So I'm proud to, you know, I'm proud to be a part of that, and I'm proud to be able to bring that to fans out there, to, you know, Dynasty fans out there, and to anybody who's fans of, you know, Chinese culture, kung fu, and anything like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. It looks nice. It looks very well, and I think, you know, it needs some revival. You know, the thing is, there is no. What I see, for example, is a lot of the stereotypical, which I really hate. You know, it's the Western way of viewing stuff, and it's not really, you know, it's not really the Chinese viewpoint of how stuff should be.
Exactly.
I also like that. Yeah, when I saw a few of the designs, I looked at, okay, you know, this is nice, and you have your characters, you have your everyday man, you have your working man, you have your nobleman, you have your educated person.
Yeah.
You know, these are all this is what the clothing style represents. You know, it has a variety, which I like, which I really like.
Absolutely, man. And it goes back to the whole cultural appropriation thing, and we're not going to get into that right now, but it goes back to that whole thing where, you know, people view Asians and people view Chinese people from a Western point of view and from a Western lens, and, you know, it's not like that. So Dynasty exists as a way for people to come in and experience, you know, Asian culture the way that Asians would want you to experience it, the way that it really is. And that's kind of our objective. So anyways, we're out of time. So I just want to thank you. Again, tell me your Chinese name one more time so I can remember it.
In Cantonese, you want it?
Sure.
Okay, Tak Tsung.
Tak Tsung 定係送？
送。
陳德松. Okay, 陳德松.
TS.
陳德松. Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to thank you for taking your time out. Obviously, we this was a long podcast, and really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, out of your weekend to do this. And we're signing off, and I want to thank everybody who's listening in still. If you guys want to check out that Neo Dynasty collection, check it out, and you can use use the code podcast to get a discount off of that collection, man. So thank you, and until next time, we'll see you then.
豪氣傲笑萬重浪，熱血熱星紅日光。